Texas Sharps. A Wild Western Action Adventure. Chapter 1. My hands are numb, Montana Jack said. He was slouched in the saddle of a mule that looked like it had been put together from spare parts, his wrists bound to the horn with rawhide that had dried tight in the Texas sun. He wasn't complaining. He was just stating a fact, like commenting on the weather or the price of beans. Circulation returns, Eldridge Sample said. Freedom doesn't. Eldridge rode the bay horse a length ahead. The lead rope of the mule dallied around his own saddle horn. The bay was tired, its coat dusty and matted with sweat, but it kept a steady pace. It knew the smell of a railhead town, and Iron Point smelled like coal smoke and creosote from 5 miles out. They crested the last rise. Iron Point sat in the valley like a smudge on a clean plate. It was a junction town where the cattle trails met the steel rails, and it had the frantic, temporary look of a place built to separate cowboys from their paychecks before they sobered up. The buildings were unpainted pine, the streets were mud ruts dried into concrete, and the train depot was the only structure that looked like it intended to stay past the next storm. "That it?" Jack asked, squinting against the glare. "That's the end of the line," Eldridge said. "Looks like a hole. I robbed a bank in Abilene that had better architecture in the outhouse." "You aren't here for the view, Jack. You're here for the cell." Eldridge nudged the bay. They rode down the slope, the mule stumbling in the loose shale. Montana Jack wasn't a big man, but he was wire tough, with a face that looked like it had been used to break rocks. He wore a derby hat that was 2 sizes too small, and a suit that had once been gray but was now the color of the road. He had robbed the Union Pacific 3 times before Eldridge caught him sleeping in a hayloft near Wichita Falls. $500, Jack mused. "That's what I'm worth." "That's what the poster said." "Insulting. I stole 10 times that." "You spent it," Eldridge said. "That depreciates the value." They hit the main street. It was crowded. Wagons loaded with hides and wool blocked the thoroughfare, drivers shouting and snapping whips. A steam whistle shrieked from the depot, a piercing sound that made the bay toss its head. Eldridge ignored the noise. He scanned the storefronts. He wasn't looking for a saloon. He was looking for the Star. He found it halfway down the block. A brick building with iron bars on the windows and a sign that said Sheriff, Iron Point. He pulled up at the hitching rail. He dismounted, his boots hitting the boardwalk with a heavy thud. He stretched his back, feeling the vertebrae pop. It had been a long ride. "Get down," Eldridge said to Jack. "I'm tied." Eldridge undid the dally. He walked back to the mule and untied the rawhide from the horn. He didn't untie Jack's hands. He grabbed the bandit by the belt and hauled him off the animal. Jack landed on his feet, staggered, and leaned against the rail. "You got a heavy hand, Marshal," Jack grunted. "I'm not a marshal," Eldridge said. "I'm a contractor." He pushed Jack toward the door. The sheriff's office was cool, dark, and smelled of stale cigar smoke and floor wax. A ceiling fan turned lazily, powered by nothing but hope and a loose belt. Behind the desk sat a man who looked like he had been carved out of suet. He was big, soft, with a mustache that hid his mouth, and a tin star that looked lost on the expanse of his vest. He was reading a newspaper and eating a pickled egg from a jar on the desk. He didn't look up when the door opened. "Help you?" the sheriff asked around a mouthful of egg. "Delivery," Eldridge said. He shoved Jack into the center of the room. Jack stumbled, caught his balance, and sneered at the lawman. "Sheriff Bullock?" Eldridge asked. The sheriff looked up then. He saw Jack. He saw the cuffs. He saw Eldridge standing in the doorway, dust on his coat and a Springfield carbine in the crook of his arm. "I'm Bullock," the sheriff said. He wiped his fingers on his trousers. "Who's this?" "Montana Jack," Eldridge said. "Train robber. Wanted by the Union Pacific." $500 reward. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the warrant. He smoothed it out on the desk. Bullock looked at the paper. He looked at Jack. "You Montana Jack?" Bullock asked. "I'm the Queen of England," Jack said. "Who wants to know?" Bullock chuckled. It was a wet sound. "He's got a mouth." "He's got a price on his head," Eldridge said. "I'm turning him in." Bullock leaned back in his chair. The wood groaned under the weight. He picked up a toothpick and went to work on a molar. "Well now," Bullock said. "That's a fine catch. A real desperado." "Open a cell," Eldridge said. "I've been riding for 3 weeks. I want to get paid, and I want to sleep." Bullock didn't reach for his keys. He looked at the warrant again. He tapped it with the toothpick. "Union Pacific," Bullock said. "That's right." "See, that's the problem," Bullock said. He looked at Eldridge with eyes that were too small for his face. "This here is a railroad warrant. Not a county warrant. Not a state warrant. It's a federal warrant," Eldridge said. "Valid in any jurisdiction." "Valid for arrest," Bullock agreed. "But not for payment. And not for holding." "What are you talking about?" "The railroad," Bullock said, leaning forward like he was sharing a secret, "has new rules. They got tired of local sheriffs collecting bounties and letting the prisoners escape before trial. So now, they want the prisoner delivered to the home office." "Kansas City," Eldridge said. "Kansas City," Bullock confirmed. "That's where the payout is. You want your 500, you gotta take him there." Eldridge stared at the sheriff. He felt the cold knot of frustration tighten in his stomach. He had $40 in his pocket, a tired horse, and a prisoner who smelled like a wet dog. Kansas City was 300 miles north. "I'm not going to Kansas City," Eldridge said. "I'm turning him over to the local authority. That's you. You hold him. You wire the railroad. They send a marshal to pick him up." "I ain't running a hotel for the Union Pacific," Bullock said. "My jail is for county prisoners. Drunks. Horse thieves. Local talent. I ain't got the budget to feed a federal prisoner for 2 weeks while the railroad takes its sweet time sending a car." "You have a jail," Eldridge said. "You have a duty." "I have a budget," Bullock snapped. "And Montana Jack ain't in it." Bullock stood up. He walked to the window and looked out at the street. "Besides," Bullock said, "I know Jack. Or I know of him. He's got friends. If I lock him up here, his friends might come looking. I got 2 deputies and a town full of wood buildings. I don't need a war." "You're scared," Eldridge said. "I'm prudent," Bullock said. He turned back. "Take him to Kansas City. Put him on the train. That's the only way you get paid." Eldridge looked at Jack. The bandit was grinning. "Looks like we're traveling partners a little longer, Marshal," Jack said. "Shut up," Eldridge said. He looked at Bullock. The sheriff was back in his chair, reaching for another egg. He wasn't going to budge. He was a wall of suet and bureaucracy. "I can't take him on the train," Eldridge said. "I don't have the fare." "That's a pickle," Bullock said. "Maybe you should let him go." "I don't let them go." "Then you better start walking." Eldridge stepped closer to the desk. He rested his hand on the Colt in his belt. "I need a cell for the night," Eldridge said. "Just tonight. I'll figure out the train in the morning." Bullock looked at the gun. He stopped chewing. "One night?" Bullock asked. "One night. I'll pay for his food." Bullock sighed. He opened a drawer and tossed a heavy iron key on the desk. "Cell 3, Bullock said. "Back corner. Buckets in the hall. You feed him, you water him, you empty the bucket. I ain't touching him. Fine. Eldridge grabbed the key. He grabbed Jack by the collar. Move, Eldridge said. He marched Jack back to the cell block. It was a stone corridor with 4 iron cages. It smelled of mildew and despair. He shoved Jack into cell 3. He locked the door. He rattled it, to be sure. Don't get comfortable, Eldridge said. We leave at dawn. You ain't got the money for tickets, Jack said, leaning against the bars. How we gonna ride? You gonna carry me? I'll get the money. How? You gonna rob the bank? I'm going to earn it. Eldridge walked back to the office. He tossed the key on the desk. Morning, Eldridge said to Bullock. Don't be late, Bullock said. I got cleaning to do. Eldridge walked out. The sun was down. The streetlights were flickering to life. The Iron Horse Saloon across the way was waking up, the piano starting a tune that sounded like trouble. Eldridge stood on the boardwalk. He checked his pockets. $2 and change. Train tickets to Kansas City cost $20 a head, plus fare for the horse. He needed $50. He looked at the saloon. He looked at the men walking in. Capital, Eldridge said. He walked toward the batwing doors. He wasn't going to rob the bank. He was going to play the odds. And in a town like Iron Point, the odds were usually sitting at a green felt table waiting to be turned. Chapter 2. Sheriff Bullock ate another pickled egg. He didn't offer one to Eldridge. He just chewed, the vinegar smell heavy in the small office, his mustache twitching like a broom sweeping a porch. Alone, Bullock said, wiping his fingers on his trousers. That's a new one. It's a business proposition, Eldridge Sample said. He was leaning against the doorframe, his thumbs hooked in his empty belt. I have an asset worth $500. It's locked in your cell. I need $50 to transport it. You give me the $50, I give you a note on the bounty. Bullock laughed. It was a wheezing sound that started in his belly and ended in a cough. You want me to loan you county money against a railroad warrant? Bullock shook his head. Sample, you might be a tracker, but you ain't a banker. The money is guaranteed. Union Pacific pays. They pay when you get there, Bullock said. If you get there. If the train don't derail. If Jack don't jump off. If you don't decide to spend the $50 on whiskey and women in Fort Worth. I don't drink when I'm working. Everyone drinks, Bullock said. He pulled a bottle from his drawer and poured a shot into a tin cup. He drank it. That's why I have a job. Bullock leaned forward, the chair creaking. Look, the sheriff said. I don't know you. You ride in here on a tired horse with a man tied to your saddle, looking like you slept in a ditch for a week. You want me to hand over $50 of the taxpayers' money on a promise? I want you to help me do my job so I can get out of your town. You can get out of my town anytime you want, Bullock said. Walk. Ride. Crawl. I don't care. But the county treasury stays in the safe. Eldridge looked at the safe in the corner. It was a heavy iron box, painted black. Jack is a flight risk, Eldridge said. If I leave him in that cell too long, he'll find a way out. He's good with locks. My locks are solid, Bullock said, offended. Iron Point steel. Nobody breaks out of my jail. Men have broken out of Huntsville, Eldridge said. And your deputy looks like he sleeps on the job. Bullock narrowed his eyes. You insulting my staff. I'm assessing the risk. The risk, Bullock said, is yours. You caught him. You transport him. That's the deal. Now get out of my office. I got paperwork. He picked up a newspaper that was 3 days old and pretended to read it. Eldridge stood there. He looked at the sheriff. He looked at the safe. He had $40 in his pocket. No, wait. He had $2. He had spent the last of his trail money on grain for the horse and a meal 3 days back. He was broke. $2, Eldridge said. What? I have $2, Eldridge said. That buys a meal and a room. It doesn't buy a train ticket. Sounds like poor planning, Bullock said without looking up. It sounds like a man who did the work and can't collect the pay. Bullock put the paper down. He sighed. You want advice? Bullock asked. Go to the saloon. Find a game. Maybe you get lucky. I don't gamble with my rent money. Then sleep in the stable, Bullock said. Or go beg at the church. Just stop bothering me. Eldridge pushed off the doorframe. He adjusted his hat. I'll be back at dawn, Eldridge said. Have him ready. He'll be here, Bullock said. Unless he turns into smoke. Eldridge walked out. The street was dark now. The gas lamps hissed, casting pools of yellow light on the mud. The noise from the Iron Horse Saloon was a roar, spilling out through the batwing doors. Eldridge stood on the boardwalk. His stomach growled. He ignored it. He walked toward the saloon. He wasn't going to beg. He wasn't going to sleep in the straw. He stopped in front of the Iron Horse. He looked over the doors. The place was packed. Smoke hung in the air like a cloud. A long bar ran down one side, crowded with men shouting for drinks. Tables filled the rest of the floor. There was a poker game in the back. 5 men. A pile of coins and bills in the center of the green felt. Eldridge watched. He watched the dealer, a man with a green visor and quick hands. He watched the players, a cowboy, 2 railroad men, and a man in a duster who looked like he carried a knife in his boot. Eldridge felt the weight of his Colt in his belt. It was the only thing of value he owned besides the horse, and the horse was his legs. Capital, Eldridge said again. He touched the $2 silver in his pocket. Not enough for a buy-in. Not at that table. He needed collateral. He walked in. The noise washed over him. He moved through the crowd, heading straight for the back. He didn't look at the bar. He didn't look at the girls. He stopped at the poker table. The dealer looked up. He had eyes like marbles. Game's full, the dealer said. I'm not looking for a seat, Eldridge said. I'm looking for a bet. We play for cash, stranger. I have something better than cash. Eldridge pulled the Colt. He didn't point it. He laid it on the table, right on top of the green felt. The steel gleamed under the lamp. Hatcher's Colt, Eldridge said. Balanced. Action smooth. Worth $20 in any pawn shop from here to St. Louis. The table went quiet. The players looked at the gun. They looked at Eldridge. You betting your iron? The man in the duster asked. He leaned back, grinning. That's a desperate move. It's a confident move, Eldridge said. What do you want? The dealer asked. $20 in chips, Eldridge said. I play until I lose it, or until I double it. If I lose, you keep the gun. And if you win, I take the cash and the gun. The dealer looked at the Colt. He picked it up. He checked the cylinder. He spun it. It was a good gun. Better than the piece of junk he carried. $20, the dealer said. He set the gun behind his stack of chips. He counted out a stack of red chips and pushed them toward an empty spot on the felt. Pull up a chair. But if you lose, don't cry about it. Eldridge sat down. He didn't take off his coat. He didn't take off his hat. Deal, Eldridge said. He looked at the cards. He looked at the men. He wasn't gambling. Gambling was for fools who trusted luck. Eldridge trusted arithmetic and the fact that most men blinked when the pressure got high. He needed $50 for the train. He needed 10 for the horse. He needed 5 for food. $65. He looked at his stack. 20. He had to triple his money. The dealer shuffled. The card snapped. Eldridge picked up his hand. 2 jacks. It was a start. $2 to open, the cowboy said. Eldridge threw 2 chips into the pot. He wasn't tired anymore. The hunger was gone, replaced by the cold focus of the hunt. The cards were just tracks in the mud. The chips were just miles. And he had a long way to go. Chapter 3. The sign in the window of the barber shop next to the saloon said hot baths 50 cents. Eldridge Sample stood on the boardwalk and looked at it. He could smell the soap from here, a clean, sharp scent of lavender and lye that cut through the prevailing odor of Iron Point, which was mostly coal smoke and wet mule. He rubbed a hand over his jaw. The stubble was 3 days old, scratching against his palm like sandpaper. His shirt was stuck to his back, stiff with the sweat of the trail and the dust of the holding cell. He reached into his pocket. He pulled out 2 silver dollars and a handful of change. $2.40. That was the sum total of his net worth. The rest was tied up in a $500 bounty that was currently sitting in a jail cell waiting for a train ticket he couldn't afford. 50 cents for water, Eldridge said. 20 for a shave. That left $1.70. Enough for a steak and a bottle of rye, but not enough to get to Kansas City. He put the money back in his pocket. He turned away from the barber shop. You can wash in the creek, he told himself. If the creek has water. He walked to the Iron Horse Saloon. The doors were heavy oak, not batwings. This was a railhead saloon, built for weather and money, not for cowboys blowing off steam on a Saturday. He pushed inside. The noise hit him first. A wall of sound made of clinking glass, shouting men, and a piano player who was hammering the keys like he was trying to kill the instrument. The air was thick, blue with cigar smoke that hung in layers near the tin ceiling. Eldridge moved to the bar. He didn't order. He just leaned his back against the wood, hooking a heel on the brass rail. He scanned the room. It was crowded. Railroad crews, cattle buyers, drifters. Money was changing hands fast. He wasn't looking for a friend. He was looking for a game. He saw the table in the back corner. It was the only round table in the room. It was covered in green felt that was worn white in spots from the friction of cards being dragged toward winners. 4 men were sitting there. 3 of them looked like locals. Shopkeepers or clerks, men with soft hands and nervous eyes who were trying to lose their weekly draw slowly. The 4th man was different. He sat facing the door. He wore a black sack coat and a vest with silver buttons. His hat was a gray bowler, perched on the back of his head. He was dealing. His hands moved with a fluid, liquid grace, shuffling the deck with a soft thwip 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 that was almost hypnotic. Shark, Eldridge whispered. The dealer had a stack of chips in front of him that was twice the size of anyone else's. He was smiling, telling a joke that made the other men laugh nervously. Eldridge pushed off the bar. He walked through the crowd. He moved with the easy, rolling gait of a man who is used to walking on uneven ground. He stopped at the table. The dealer looked up. He didn't stop shuffling. His eyes were pale gray, the color of dirty ice. Seats open, the dealer said. $5 buy-in. No credit. No paper. Eldridge looked at the empty chair. He looked at the pot. There was about $40 in the center. I don't have $5, Eldridge said. The dealer didn't blink. Then you don't have a seat. Bars over there. Whiskey's 2 bits. The other players chuckled. One of them, a man with ink stains on his fingers, shook his head. Beat it, stranger. This is a gentleman's game. I'm not a gentleman, Eldridge said. And I'm not looking for charity. He unbuckled his gun belt. The laughter stopped. The man with the ink stains went pale. The dealer stopped shuffling. Eldridge didn't draw the gun. He took the whole rig off, belt, holster, and the heavy Colt peacemaker. He coiled the belt around the holster. He set it on the table. It landed with a heavy, dull thud on the green felt, right next to the dealer's stack of chips. Hatcher's Colt, Eldridge said. Taken off a cavalry captain who didn't need it anymore. Action smooth. Trigger light. Holster is custom leather. The dealer looked at the gun. He looked at Eldridge. He saw the dust on the coat. He saw the eyes that were colder than his own. You betting iron? The dealer asked. I'm betting the hardware, Eldridge said. Against $20 in chips. A pawn shop would give you 10. A pawn shop isn't sitting at this table looking for action, Eldridge said. $20. 1 stack. The dealer reached out. He touched the grip of the Colt. It was worn smooth walnut. He recognized quality. And he recognized desperation. He thought he saw a man who was broke, tired, and making a bad decision. He smiled. $20, the dealer said. He counted out a stack of red chips. He pushed them across the felt. He pulled the gun belt toward him, setting it beside his elbow like a trophy. Name's Carver, the dealer said. Just so you know who owns your gun when you walk out. Sample, Eldridge said. He sat down. He put his hat on the table. Deal the cards. Carver picked up the deck. He riffled them. 5-card stud. Jacks or better to open. He dealt. The cards hit the felt with a snap. Eldridge picked up his hand. He didn't look at his face cards yet. He looked at Carver. He looked at the other players. He wasn't playing the cards. He was playing the man who thought he had already won. He fanned the hand. A pair of 8s. 2 to open, the ink-stained man said, tossing a white chip. Eldridge threw a red chip into the pot. I'm in, Eldridge said. He leaned back in the chair. He felt the empty space on his hip where the gun should be. It felt light. Dangerous. He had 40 minutes to turn a pistol into a train ticket. Hit me, Eldridge said. Chapter 4. The 2 of clubs hit the felt with a soft thwip. Pair of 8s, the dealer Carver said. He didn't look at the card. He looked at Eldridge. You're high. $5, Eldridge said. He pushed a stack of red chips into the center. It was a quarter of his stake. The cowboy folded. The railroad men folded. Carver stayed. He tossed in $5 without blinking. Call, Carver said. He dealt the next card. A jack of diamonds for Eldridge. A 10 of spades for himself. Jacks and 8s, Carver said. Dead man's hand. If you had the aces. I don't need aces, Eldridge said. $10. He pushed half his remaining stack in. Carver smiled. It was a thin, predatory expression. He looked at his whole card. He looked at Eldridge's face. He was reading the map of the man across from him, looking for the twitch, the sweat, the hesitation. He saw nothing. Just dust and blue eyes. Call, Carver said. Last card. Eldridge got a 4 of clubs. Useless. Carver dealt himself a king of hearts. King high, Carver said. Your bet. Eldridge looked at his hand. Pair of 8s on the board. A jack, a 2, a 4. Garbage. He looked at Carver's board. 10 king, 6 queen. No pair showing. But he had a whole card. All in, Eldridge said. He pushed his last $5 into the pot. The room seemed to get quieter. The piano player hit a sour note. The men at the bar turned to watch. It wasn't every day a drifter bet his last nickel against the house shark. Carver stared at him. He tapped his finger on his hole card. You're bluffing, Carver said. Maybe, Eldridge said. But the gun is still on the table. You want to win the pot, you have to call. Carver looked at the Colt. He looked at the pot. $60. I call, Carver said. He threw in $5. He flipped his hole card. A king. Pair of kings. Kings win, Carver said, reaching for the pot. Eldridge didn't move. He sat there, his hands resting on the table. You didn't look at my hole card, Eldridge said. Carver froze. You got eights showing. And one down, Eldridge said. He flipped his card. An 8 of spades. 3 of a kind. Trips, Eldridge said. Eights beat kings. He reached out. He scooped the pot toward him. He picked up the Colt. Carver's face went white, then red. He slammed his hand on the table. You cheated, Carver hissed. The accusation hung in the air like smoke. I played the cards, Eldridge said. He started stacking the chips. And I won. You cheated, Carver stood up, kicking his chair back. I dealt that hand. I know what was in the deck. If you knew what was in the deck, Eldridge said calmly, then you're the cheat. The other players backed away. The bartender reached under the counter for a scattergun. Nobody takes my money, Carver said. Not a saddle tramp. He looked at the man in the duster, the one who looked like he carried a knife. Take him, Carver said. The man in the duster moved. He went for his gun. He was fast, but he was telegraphing it. His shoulder dipped. His eyes widened. Eldridge didn't draw. He already had the Colt in his hand. He didn't shoot. He swung. He brought the heavy barrel down on the man's wrist as the gun cleared leather. Crack. Bone snapped. The man screamed, dropping his pistol. He grabbed his wrist, doubling over. Carver roared. He reached for a hideout gun inside his coat. Eldridge stood up. He grabbed the front of Carver's vest. He yanked him forward, slamming him chest first onto the table. Chips flew everywhere. Eldridge jammed the muzzle of the Colt into Carver's ear. Don't, Eldridge whispered. Carver froze. His eyes were crossed, trying to see the gun. He was breathing hard, smelling of fear and hair tonic. I won, Eldridge said. Fair and square. You. I'm cashing out, Eldridge said. He let go of Carver. He shoved him back into his chair. Eldridge scooped up the money. Not the chips. The cash. He stuffed the bills into his pocket. He grabbed a handful of silver dollars. He backed away toward the door. He kept the Colt leveled at the table. The man with the broken wrist was moaning on the floor. The other players were frozen, hands raised. You fellas have a way of making a man feel unwanted around here, Eldridge said. You're dead, Carver shouted, his face purple. You hear me? You don't walk out of this town with my money. Watch me, Eldridge said. He backed through the batwing doors. He hit the boardwalk and turned. He didn't run. He walked fast, heading for the hotel. He counted the money in his pocket by feel. $40. Enough for a ticket. Enough for a meal. He had played the hand. He had won the pot. But he knew the game wasn't over. Men like Carver didn't fold. They just went to get more ammunition. Eldridge checked the street. It was dark. Quiet. Sleep fast, he told himself. He headed for the hotel. the $40 burning a hole in his pocket, and the echo of the snap of bones still ringing in his ears. Chapter 5. The mattress was stuffed with corn husks that rustled every time the wind hit the loose window pane. Eldridge Sample stood in the dark. He looked at the bed. He had arranged the pillows and the thin wool blanket into a shape that looked, in the dim light coming from the street, like a man sleeping on his side. It wasn't art, but it was enough to fool a drunk with a gun for the 2 seconds that mattered. He moved the washstand. He slid it away from the wall, clearing the corner behind the door. He sat down on the floor. He checked the Colt. 5 rounds. He rested the barrel on his knee. He waited. The hotel was a sounding board. He could hear the boots of the miners coming up the stairs, heavy and slow. He could hear the cough of the man in the next room. He could hear the piano from the Iron Horse across the street, tinny and distant, playing a song about a girl who left a boy for a soldier. $40, Eldridge whispered. It wasn't a lot of money. But to men like Carver, losing wasn't about the arithmetic. It was about the insult. You don't let a saddle tramp walk into your town, take your pot, break your man's wrist, and walk out. It sets a bad precedent. Eldridge checked the window. It was closed, the shade drawn. No way in from the street unless they had a ladder, and angry men rarely bring ladders. They use doors. Time dragged. The piano stopped. The saloon noise faded to a dull roar, then a murmur. Eldridge didn't sleep. He breathed through his nose, shallow and quiet. Footsteps. They were different from the miners. The miners walked with a heavy, flat-footed plod. These steps were trying to be quiet. The floorboards creaked, then stopped, then creaked again. 2 men. Maybe 3. They stopped outside room 3. Eldridge cocked the hammer. He held the trigger back and thumbed the hammer down, muffling the click. He held it at full cock. A hand tried the knob. It rattled. Locked. A whisper. Kick it. You kick it. My leg hurts. Just hit it, damn it. Eldridge raised the Colt. He aimed at the doorframe, waist high. A boot hit the wood. Crash. The lock shattered. The door flew open, banging against the washstand Eldridge had moved. 2 shapes filled the doorway. They were backlit by the hall lamp. They didn't pause to let their eyes adjust. They saw the lump in the bed. They opened fire. Bang. 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 The room lit up with muzzle flashes. The sound was deafening, a hammer striking an anvil inside a closet. The blanket jumped as the bullets tore into the corn husks. Feathers, no husks, sprayed into the air. They kept shooting. They wanted the man in the bed dead. They were pouring lead into the pillow. That's enough, Eldridge said. He stood up from the corner. The 2 men spun. They were the cowboy and the clerk, the ink-stained man from the poker table. They looked at Eldridge. They looked at the bed. They looked confused. The cowboy tried to bring his gun around. Eldridge fired. Boom. The heavy .45 slug hit the cowboy in the right shoulder. It punched him backward into the door jamb. He dropped his pistol, grabbing his arm, spinning away. The clerk froze. He had a small revolver, a .32. He pointed it at Eldridge, his hand shaking so bad he was aiming everywhere at once. Don't, Eldridge said. The clerk pulled the trigger. The shot went wide, shattering the pitcher on the washstand. Water splashed onto Eldridge's boots. Eldridge fired. He aimed low. The bullet took the clerk in the thigh. The clerk screamed. His leg folded. He went down, hitting the floor hard, his gun skittering across the planks. Silence rushed back into the room, ringing in Eldridge's ears. The smell of black powder was thick, choking. Eldridge walked forward. He kicked the cowboy's gun into the hall. He kicked the clerk's gun under the bed. He looked at them. The cowboy was sliding down the wall, clutching his shoulder. Blood was seeping through his fingers, dark and slick. "You shot me," the cowboy gasped. He sounded surprised. "I aimed for the meat," Eldridge said. "If I wanted you dead, you wouldn't be talking." He looked at the clerk. The man was rolling on the floor, holding his leg. "My leg. You broke my leg." "It's a flesh wound," Eldridge said. "You'll limp, but you'll live. Unless you try to reach for that gun again." Other doors in the hallway opened. Heads poked out. Miners in long johns, looking scared. "Go back to sleep," Eldridge yelled. "Just settling a bet." The heads disappeared. Doors slammed. In Iron Point, you minded your own business if you wanted to see breakfast. Eldridge holstered his Colt. He walked to the washstand. He picked up the towel, now wet from the broken pitcher. He wiped the powder residue from his face. "Get up," Eldridge said. "I can't," the clerk sobbed. "Get up or I drag you." Eldridge grabbed the cowboy by his good arm. He hauled him to his feet. The man swayed, pale. "Walk," Eldridge said. He shoved him toward the stairs. He grabbed the clerk by the collar. He pulled him up. The clerk hopped on one leg, screaming. "Shut up," Eldridge said. "You came here to kill a man in his sleep. You don't get to cry about the outcome." They went down the stairs. It was a slow, messy procession. Blood dripped on the steps. The clerk moaned with every hop. They reached the lobby. The night clerk was gone, hiding behind the desk or out the back door. Eldridge pushed them out onto the boardwalk. The street was empty. The shooting had cleared the late-night drunks. "Where are we going?" the cowboy asked. He was holding his shoulder tight, his face gray. "The jail," Eldridge said. "The sheriff ain't gonna like this," the cowboy said. "He knows us. We play cards with him." "I know," Eldridge said. "That's why we're waking him up." They walked down the street. Eldridge kept behind them, his hand on his gun. They reached the brick jailhouse. It was dark. Eldridge tried the door. Locked. He hammered on it with his fist. "Sheriff, open up." No answer. "Kick it," Eldridge told the cowboy. "I can't. My shoulder." "You got feet. Kick it." The cowboy kicked the door. Weakly. Harder. He kicked it again. A light flared inside. Steps. The bolt threw back. Sheriff Bullock opened the door. He was wearing his trousers and suspenders over a union suit. He had a shotgun in his hand. He looked sleepy and angry. "Who the hell is making that?" He saw the cowboy bleeding. He saw the clerk hopping. He saw Eldridge standing behind them. Bullock lowered the shotgun. He looked at the blood on his porch. "What is this?" Bullock asked. "Delivery," Eldridge said. "2 attempted murderers. Caught in the act." "In the act of what?" "Shooting my bed," Eldridge said. "Room 3. You can go count the holes in the mattress." Bullock looked at the cowboy. "Joe, what the hell were you doing?" "Carver sent us," the cowboy groaned. Said to teach him a lesson." "Looks like you got schooled," Bullock said. He looked at Eldridge. He saw the cold anger in the man's face. He saw that Eldridge hadn't killed them, which meant he wanted something else. He wanted the law to work. "You shot him," Bullock said. "Self-defense," Eldridge said. "They kicked my door. They fired first. 4 rounds. You winged 'em. I leave the hanging to you, Sheriff." Eldridge shoved the clerk through the door. The man fell onto the floor of the office. "Lock them up," Eldridge said. "Charge them. Attempted murder." Bullock looked at his friends bleeding on his floor. He looked at Eldridge. "This is a mess," Bullock said. "Carver ain't gonna like this." "Carver isn't the law," Eldridge said. "You are. Unless you want me to finish it right here." Bullock hesitated. He weighed the trouble. He decided that locking them up was easier than fighting a man who had just taken down 2 gunmen without getting scratched. "Get in the cell," Bullock told the cowboy. "I'll get the doc." He herded them back. He locked the door. Eldridge stepped into the office. "I'm taking my prisoner," Eldridge said. "Montana Jack?" "I'm taking him. Now. It's 3 in the morning." "The train leaves at 6, Eldridge said. "I'm not waiting around for Carver to find more friends." Bullock shrugged. "Suit yourself. He's in the back. Probably asleep." Eldridge walked to the back. He unlocked Montana Jack's cell. Jack was awake. He was sitting on the cot, grinning. "Heard the noise," Jack said. "You having a party without me?" "Party's over," Eldridge said. He grabbed Jack's arm. "We're going to the depot." "You get the money." "I got the money." Eldridge hauled him out. He walked past the sheriff. "Keep them locked up, Bullock," Eldridge said. "If I come back and find them drinking in the saloon, we're going to have a problem." "You ain't coming back," Bullock said. "You're getting on a train." "I might miss it," Eldridge said. He walked Jack out into the night. They headed for the depot. The station was quiet, the Olympian, no, wrong story, the train engine hissing steam on the siding. Eldridge bought 2 tickets from the sleepy agent. $40. He had just enough left for coffee. He sat on the bench, his gun in his lap, Jack cuffed to the armrest. He watched the street. He watched the jailhouse. The light went out. "He's going back to sleep," Eldridge said. "He's gonna let him go," Jack said. "Soon as you leave." "Probably." "Does it bother you?" "It bothers me," Eldridge said. "But I got a job. And the job is you." The train whistle blew. Eldridge stood up. He hauled Jack to his feet. "Let's go to Kansas City," Eldridge said. They boarded the train. Eldridge took a seat by the window. He watched Iron Point slide away in the dark. He touched the money in his pocket. Empty. He touched the gun. Full. He had survived the night. He had won the hand. But he knew, deep down, that the game wasn't over. Men like Carver didn't forget. And men like Bullock didn't change. He closed his eyes. He listened to the rhythm of the wheels. Click-clack. Click-clack. He was leaving. But the tracks ran both ways. Chapter 6. The sheriff's office smelled of yesterday's coffee, and the kind of floor sealer that doesn't quite cover the scent of blood. Sheriff Bullock walked in at 9:30. He was wearing his badge, but his shirt was untucked on one side, and his eyes had the puffy, red-rimmed look of a man who had slept hard and woken up angry. Eldridge Sample was sitting on the corner of the desk, drinking the last of the coffee. "You're in my chair," Bullock said. "I kept it warm for you," Eldridge said. He stood up. "And I filled your cells." Bullock looked at the cell block. He saw Montana Jack in cell 3, grinning like a possum. He saw the cowboy in cell 1, his arm in a sling made from a bedsheet. He saw the clerk in cell 2, his leg propped up on a bucket, moaning softly. "What a mess," Bullock said. He walked to the rack and hung up his hat. "I leave you alone for 6 hours, Sample, and you turn my jail into a hospital." "I turned it into a holding pen for criminals," Eldridge said. "Which is what the sign outside says it is." "They're locals," Bullock grumbled, sitting down. He picked up a pencil and tapped it on the desk. "Voters. Taxpayers. Carver ain't gonna be happy." Carver isn't the law. Carver runs the game, Bullock said. And you just busted up his table. Eldridge leaned over the desk. He put his hands on the wood. He invaded Bullock's space just enough to make the sheriff lean back. They kicked in my door, Eldridge said. They fired 4 rounds into my bed. If I was sleeping where I was supposed to be, you'd be filling out a coroner's report instead of complaining about the paperwork. Bullock looked at Eldridge's eyes. They were blue flint, hard and unblinking. Attempted murder, Eldridge said. That's the charge. I want it written down. Fine, Bullock said. He pulled a ledger from the drawer. He opened it. Attempted murder. 2 counts. Cowboy and clerk. He scribbled something. It looked more like a doodle than a legal record. And I want them held, Eldridge said, until the circuit judge comes through. Judge don't come for a month. Then feed them beans for a month. If I hear they walked out the back door 5 minutes after I leave, I'm going to take it personal. Bullock looked up. He smiled. It was a greasy, unpleasant expression. You leaving? Bullock asked. Train leaves in an hour. I got my prisoner. I got my ticket. Well then, Bullock said, closing the ledger. Have a safe trip. Don't worry about these boys. I'll handle them. Like you handled the loan? That was business, Bullock said. This is law. I know the difference. Eldridge looked at him. He knew Bullock was lying. He knew the moment the train whistle blew, those keys were going to turn. But he had a federal warrant to execute and a $500 payday waiting in Kansas City. He couldn't babysit a crooked sheriff in a Dust Bowl town forever. I'll be back, Eldridge lied. To testify. Sure, Bullock said. We'll keep a light on for you. Eldridge walked back to the cells. Let's go, Jack, Eldridge said. He unlocked cell 3. Montana Jack stepped out. He stretched. Breakfast included in the fare. Hardtack on the train, Eldridge said. He cuffed Jack's hands in front of him this time. Move. He looked at the cowboy and the clerk. Don't get comfortable, Eldridge told them. The sheriff says he's keeping you. The cowboy spat through the bars. Sheriff says a lot of things. Go to hell, drifter. Already there, Eldridge said. He marched Jack out of the office. The morning air was cool, but the sun was already threatening heat. The street was busy with wagons rolling toward the depot. They walked to the station. The train was there, a black iron beast hissing steam, the coal car piled high. Eldridge showed his tickets to the conductor. Smoking car, the conductor asked, eyeing Jack's cuffs. Baggage car, Eldridge said. He smells. Suit yourself. Train leaves in 10 minutes. They loaded up. Eldridge changed Jack to a support post in the baggage car, right next to a crate of chickens that clucked nervously. You staying with me? Jack asked. I'm going to get some air, Eldridge said. Don't talk to the chickens. He walked through the train to the passenger car. It was half full. Ranchers, salesmen, a few women in bonnets. And a group that didn't fit. They were sitting near the front. 4 of them. A man in a tweed suit that looked too heavy for Texas. He had a mustache waxed to points and was reading a newspaper from New York. 2 women. One older, wearing a dress with enough lace to curtain a window. She looked like she was smelling something bad. The other younger, pretty in a sharp, expensive way, wearing a traveling outfit that probably cost more than Eldridge's horse. And a young man, maybe 25, dressed like he was going on a safari. Pith helmet on the seat next to him. Shiny boots. He was looking out the window, at the mud of Iron Point, like it was an exhibit in a museum. City slickers, Eldridge thought. He found a seat 2 rows back. He pulled his hat down over his eyes. The whistle blew. The train lurched. The couplings clanged. Iron Point began to slide away. The jailhouse. The saloon. The barber shop. Eldridge let out a breath. He touched the money in his pocket, the $40 he'd won. He touched the gun. He was out. He had the prisoner. He had the ticket. He closed his eyes. "Excuse me, sir." Eldridge opened one eye. The young man in the safari getup was standing in the aisle. He was holding a silver flask. "My aunt," the young man said, pointing to the older woman. "She feels a bit faint. The heat, you know. I wondered if you might know if the conductor sells ice." Eldridge pushed his hat back. "Ice melts in Texas, son," Eldridge said. "Tell her to fan herself." The young man blinked. "Oh, I see. Well, thank you." He didn't move. He looked at Eldridge's coat. He looked at the gun belt. Are you a cowboy?" the young man asked. His eyes were wide, eager. "I'm a passenger," Eldridge said. "Of course. It's just, we're from Boston. We're traveling west. To see the frontier. The real West." "You're seeing it," Eldridge said. "Mud. Flies. And heat." "We want to see the wild parts," the young man insisted. "The Indians. The outlaws." Eldridge looked at him. He looked at the soft hands, the clean collar. "Go to Kansas City," Eldridge said. "Eat a steak. Buy a postcard. Then turn around and go home." "But—" "The wild parts," Eldridge said, "don't care about your ticket. They just eat you." He pulled his hat back down. "Class dismissed," Eldridge said. The young man stood there for a second, disappointed. Then he turned and went back to his seat. The train gathered speed, clicking rhythmically over the rails, carrying the guilty and the innocent and the fools away from Iron Point, heading north toward the home office and the hard lesson waiting at the end of the line. Chapter 7. The smoking car of the 9:15 to Kansas City was a hazy tube of blue tobacco smoke and silence, punctuated only by the rhythmic click-clack of the wheels on the iron rails. Eldridge Sample sat near the door, his hat pulled low, his legs stretched out. He wasn't smoking. He was watching. 2 rows up, Montana Jack was chained to the seat frame, asleep, his mouth open, snoring softly. He looked peaceful, for a man heading toward a 20-year stretch in a federal penitentiary. Across the aisle, the young man in the safari outfit, the one who had asked for ice in Texas, was trying to engage a cattle buyer in conversation. The cattle buyer, a man with a face like a dried apple, was ignoring him with the practiced ease of someone who had dealt with fools his whole life. "But surely," the young man said, his voice carrying over the noise of the train, "you've seen a shootout. A duel in the street at high noon." "Son," the cattle buyer said without looking up from his ledger, "the only thing that happens at high noon is people sweat." The young man looked deflated. He turned back to his party. They were an odd collection for a smoking car, but the conductor had likely moved them there to get away from the draft in the main carriage. Or maybe he just wanted to annoy the regulars. The older woman, Mrs. Sterling, was fanning herself with a lace fan, looking at the soot-stained ceiling with an expression of profound distaste. The younger woman, Mrs. Harrington, was looking out the window at the endless expanse of scrub brush and nothingness, her eyes bright with a kind of romantic curiosity that usually got people killed out here. And the man in the tweed suit, Mr. Brooks. He was polishing his spectacles, looking nervous. "Percy," Mr. Brooks said to the young man. "Sit down. You're bothering the gentleman." "I'm just asking questions, Father," Percy said. He sat down, but he didn't stay still. He fidgeted. He adjusted his pith helmet. He looked like a puppy in a room full of wolves. Eldridge shifted in his seat. He felt the weight of the Colt on his hip. He felt the $40 in his pocket. It was enough for a meal and a room in Kansas City, and maybe a new shirt. He closed his eyes. "Excuse me." Eldridge opened one eye. Percy was standing in the aisle again. He was looking at Eldridge. "Sir," Percy said, "I couldn't help but notice you're a prisoner." Eldridge pushed his hat back. "He's sleeping." "Yes. But the chains. Is he dangerous?" "Only when he's awake," Eldridge said. "And only if you have something he wants." "What did he do?" "Robbed a train," Eldridge said. "Like this one." Percy's eyes went wide. "Really? A train robber? Like Jesse James?" "Less famous," Eldridge said. "More clumsy. He fell out of a hayloft when I caught him." Mrs. Harrington turned from the window. She looked at Eldridge. She was pretty in a sharp East Coast way, with blonde hair pinned up tight and a dress that cost more than the train car they were riding in. "You're a lawman?" she asked. "Contractor," Eldridge said. "That sounds mercenary," she said. She didn't say it like an insult. She said it like she was tasting a new word. "It pays the bills, ma'am." "We're going to the frontier," Percy announced. "To see the West before it's gone. Father says civilization is ruining it." Mr. Brooks sighed. "I said the railroad is civilizing it, Percy. There's a difference." "We want to see the wild parts," Mrs. Sterling said, snapping her fan shut. "The Indians. The buffalo. The excitement." Eldridge looked at them. They were tourists. They were looking for a show. They didn't understand that the show usually involved dysentery, rattlesnakes, and men who would cut your throat for your boots. "Turn back," Eldridge said. They looked at him, surprised. "I beg your pardon?" Mr. Brooks said. "Turn back at Kansas City," Eldridge said. "Get on a train going east. Go home." "Why?" Percy asked. "We're prepared. We have supplies. We have firearms." He patted a leather case at his feet. "You have targets," Eldridge said. "You're wearing expensive clothes. You talk loud. You look like money walking." "We can take care of ourselves," Mrs. Harrington said. Her chin went up. "Can you?" Eldridge asked. "Can you track a man across hardpan? Can you find water in a dry wash? Can you shoot a man who's smiling at you?" She hesitated. I'm a good shot. With a target pistol." "Paper targets don't shoot back," Eldridge said. He leaned forward. "The West isn't a museum," Eldridge said. "It's a place where things die. Animals. People. Dreams. If you go out there looking for a story, you're going to end up as a headline in a newspaper nobody reads." The older woman, Mrs. Sterling, sniffed. "You're very rude, sir." "I'm honest," Eldridge said. "That's rare out here. Usually costs extra." He pulled his hat back down. "Go home. Buy a painting of a buffalo. It's safer." He closed his eyes again. The train rattled on. The city slickers whispered among themselves. They thought he was a cynic. They thought he was just a tired cowboy trying to scare them. They didn't know he was trying to save their lives. But people like that never listened. They had to touch the stove to know it was hot. And by then, the skin was already burned off. Eldridge drifted. He thought about the sheriff in Iron Point. He thought about the two men he'd shot in the hotel room. He hoped they were still in jail. But he knew better. The wheels clicked a rhythm. Trouble coming. Trouble coming. Eldridge slept with one hand on his gun, waiting for the train to stop. Chapter 8. The clerk at the Union Pacific office in Kansas City had fingers stained with ink and a face that looked like it had been pressed between the pages of a ledger for 20 years. He counted the gold eagles onto the oak counter with a slow, rhythmic clink-clack that sounded better than any piano music Eldridge Sample had ever heard. 480, the clerk said. He paused, adjusting his spectacles. And 20. He pushed the stack across the wood. $500. Montana Jack stood by the window, cuffed to a radiator pipe. He was eating an apple he'd charmed off a secretary in the outer office. That's it? Jack asked, spraying bits of apple. No speech? No thank you for making the rails safe. Sign here, the clerk said to Eldridge, pushing a receipt forward. Eldridge signed. Sample. He put the pen down. He scooped the coins into a canvas sack he'd bought at a dry goods store on the way over. The weight was substantial. It pulled at his coat pocket, a heavy, comforting drag. You're done, the clerk said. He looked at 2 railroad bulls standing by the door. Take him down to the holding cells. The marshal from Leavenworth picks him up Tuesday. One of the bulls unlocked Jack from the radiator. He grabbed Jack's arm. So long, Sample, Jack said. He grinned. If you ever get tired of chasing people, look me up in 5 years. I'll need a partner who don't talk much. In 5 years, Eldridge said, you'll still be breaking rocks. Maybe. Or maybe I'll get lucky. They hauled Jack out. The door closed, cutting off his laugh. Eldridge looked at the clerk. Train schedule. Southbound. The Gulf Flyer leaves at noon, the clerk said. Heading for Galveston, via Denison and Fort Worth. Does it stop at Iron Point? It stops for water, Eldridge said. Or if there's a cow on the track. Ticket is $18. Eldridge pulled a double eagle from the sack. He slapped it on the counter. Keep the change. Buy a hat that fits. He walked out. Kansas City was loud. It was paved. It had streetcars and brick buildings that went up 4 stories. It smelled of coal smoke and slaughterhouses, money and manure mixed together in a thick gray paste. Eldridge hated it. He had 2 hours before the train. He used them efficiently. He went to a bathhouse. He paid 50 cents for hot water and a bar of soap that didn't smell like lye. He scrubbed the Texas dust out of his pores. He shaved. He went to a haberdashery. He bought a shirt. White cotton, stiff collar. He bought a box of .45 cartridges. He bought a new hat, a Stetson with a wider brim to cut the sun. He went to a chop house. He ate a steak that was thick, rare, and didn't require chewing. He drank a beer that was actually cold. He felt like a human being again. But he didn't feel settled. He felt the pull of the South. Not because he missed Iron Point was a hole, but because of the bay horse. He'd left the animal in a livery stable run by a boy who chewed straw. A horse like that, a horse that had carried him through the Caprock and the Apache Wars, didn't deserve to be sold off to a tinker for glue money. One horse, Eldridge said to his reflection in the chop house mirror. Then we drift west. California. Or maybe up to Montana. He walked to the depot. The Gulf Flyer was steaming on the track. It was a passenger train, cleaner than the one he'd ridden up on. He found a seat in the second car. He put his saddlebags, new ones, leather, not canvas, on the overhead rack. He sat down. He pulled his hat low. He watched the platform. People were rushing, saying goodbyes, hauling trunks. It was the business of civilization, frantic and loud. The whistle blew. The train jerked, the couplings banging tight. It started to roll. Eldridge relaxed. The rhythm of the wheels took over. Click-clack. Click-clack. He closed his eyes. Is this seat taken? Eldridge didn't open his eyes. He knew the voice. It was precise, educated, and completely out of place on a train heading into the scrublands. "It's taken," Eldridge said. "Oh, come now, Mr. Sample. There's plenty of room." Eldridge pushed his hat back. Mr. Brooks was standing in the aisle. He was wearing a new tweed suit, this one even louder than the last. He was smiling, a nervous, apologetic expression that seemed permanently etched on his face. Behind him stood the rest of the circus. Mrs. Sterling, the aunt, looking like she had just smelled a dead cat. Mrs. Harrington, Victoria, looking like she was about to open a present. And Percy. Percy was wearing the pith helmet. He had added a bandolier of ammunition across his chest, though he didn't seem to have a rifle to go with it. "You," Eldridge said. "Us." Percy beamed. He squeezed past Mr. Brooks and sat in the seat facing Eldridge. "We saw you boarding. I told Uncle William, that's him. That's the contractor." "I thought I told you to go home," Eldridge said. "We discussed it," Mr. Brooks said, taking the seat next to Percy. The women settled into the seats across the aisle, arranging their skirts like they were settling into a box at the opera. And the ladies, well, the ladies felt that we hadn't really seen the frontier yet. "You saw a train robber in chains," Eldridge said. "That's the frontier. Dirty, tired, and smelling of old sweat." "But the scenery," Victoria said. She leaned across the aisle. Her eyes were bright, blue, and dangerous in their naivety. "Kansas City is just buildings. It's bricks. We want the vistas. The open range. We want adventure," Percy declared. He tapped his pith helmet. "I bought a map. It says Iron Point is the gateway to the hill country. Rugged terrain. Ideally suited for exploration." "It's suited for getting shot," Eldridge said. "Iron Point is a railhead for cattle and trouble. The sheriff is crooked. The deputies are thieves. The whiskey is poison." "Perfect," Percy said. "Authentic." Eldridge looked at Mr. Brooks. The man shrugged, a gesture of helpless surrender to the whims of his family. "I tried, Mr. Sample," Brooks said softly. "But Victoria, she has a strong will. And Mrs. Sterling, she wants to see a buffalo before they're all gone." "The buffalo are gone," Eldridge said. 10 years ago. Now it's just bones and dust." "We have a guide," Mrs. Sterling announced. She pointed a gloved finger at Eldridge. "You." "No," Eldridge said. "We're willing to pay," Brooks said quickly. "For protection. For advice." "I gave you advice. Go home." "We're going to Iron Point," Victoria said. "We have tickets. We have reservations at the hotel." "The hotel has bedbugs," Eldridge said. "And the last time I stayed there, 2 men kicked my door in and shot my pillow." "Really?" Percy's eyes popped. "A shootout. At the hotel." "It wasn't a shootout. It was an eviction notice." "Did you shoot back?" "I'm here, aren't I?" Percy turned to his uncle. "See, I told you he was the real thing. A gunfighter." "I'm not a gunfighter," Eldridge said. "I'm a man going to get his horse." "We'll buy horses," Victoria said. "We'll ride with you." Eldridge looked at them. They were relentless. They were wealthy, bored, and armed with a complete lack of understanding of how the world worked west of the Mississippi. They thought the West was a novel they could read, and then close when it got too scary. They didn't know that the book didn't close. "Listen to me," Eldridge said. He leaned forward. He used his command voice, the one that made drunks sit down. "Iron Point isn't a playground. There are men there, Carver, the card sharps, who will look at your clothes and your luggage and see a walking bank vault. They won't ask for a withdrawal slip. They'll just take it." "We have weapons," Percy said. He patted a holster on his hip. It was brand new leather, stiff and orange. The gun inside was a shiny Smith & Wesson that looked like it had never been fired. "Do you know how to use it?" Eldridge asked. "I've practiced. At the club range. Shooting paper targets in a basement isn't the same as shooting a man who's trying to put a hole in your liver," Eldridge said. "We'll be careful," Brooks said. "We just want to observe. From a distance." "Trouble doesn't keep a distance," Eldridge said. He sat back. He pulled his hat over his eyes. "You're on the wrong train," Eldridge said. "But it's a free country. Just don't follow me when we get off." "We wouldn't dream of intruding," Mrs. Sterling sniffed. "Good." The train rolled south. The green fields of Kansas gave way to the rolling plains of Oklahoma, then the red dirt of Texas. The air in the car got hotter, stuffier. Eldridge slept. Or he pretended to. He kept one ear open, listening to the city slickers chatter. They talked about landscapes. They talked about the noble savages. They talked about the romance of the cowboy. They were writing their own eulogies, and they didn't even know it. The hours passed. The sun went down, turning the sky into a bruised purple sheet. The train rattled through the dark, a worm of light moving through the void. Eldridge woke up when the rhythm changed. The train was slowing down. It wasn't a station stop. There were no lights outside, just the black wall of the scrub brush. The brakes squealed, metal grinding on metal. The couplings clashed as the cars bunched up. "Why are we stopping?" Mrs. Sterling asked, her voice shrill in the quiet car. "Are we there?" "We're nowhere," Eldridge said. He sat up. He looked out the window. Nothing but darkness and mesquite. He stood up. He walked to the door of the car. He opened it and stepped out onto the platform between the cars. He leaned out, looking forward toward the engine. There was a fire on the tracks. A pile of logs, burning bright orange, blocking the rails. And men. Men on horses, riding alongside the train, matching its speed as it slowed. They wore masks. They carried torches and shotguns. "Trouble," Eldridge said. He stepped back inside. He locked the door. He turned to the Harringtons. They were looking at him, confused, expectant. "Get down," Eldridge said. "What?" Percy asked. "Get on the floor," Eldridge said. "Between the seats. Now." Is it a robbery?" Victoria asked. She didn't look scared. She looked excited. "It's a holdup," Eldridge said. "And these aren't the kind of robbers who ask for tickets." The train jerked to a halt. Gunfire erupted outside. Glass shattered in the car ahead. Screams. Eldridge drew his Colt. He checked the load. "Stay down," he repeated. "And for God's sake, Percy, keep your hand off that shiny toy." The door at the front of the car kicked open. "Everybody reach," a voice roared. 3 men stepped in. They wore long dusters and flour sack masks with holes cut for the eyes. They held sawed-off shotguns. Eldridge sat back down. He kept his gun hidden under his coat, resting on his thigh. He raised his left hand. He wasn't going to fight 3 shotguns in a crowded car. Not for the railroad's money. Not for the tourists. He watched. The leader of the bandits walked down the aisle. He wasn't looking at the passengers' wallets. He wasn't looking at the women's jewelry. He was looking at faces. He stopped at the Harrington's seat. He looked at Percy. He pulled a piece of paper from his pocket. A photograph. He compared it to Percy's face. "Bingo," the bandit said. He grabbed Percy by the lapels of his safari jacket and hauled him up. "You're coming with us, kid," the bandit said. Chapter 9. The logs weren't small. They were heavy, creosote-soaked railroad ties, dragged across the tracks in a pile that looked like a beaver dam built by a giant with a grudge. The train had stopped 50 yards short, the engineer hauling back on the brake lever so hard the iron wheels screamed like a woman in a bad dream. Now the locomotive hissed, venting steam into the night, a wounded dragon waiting to be put down. Eldridge Sample sat on the floor of the passenger car, his back against the seat frame. He had his Colt in his hand, resting on his thigh, hidden by the folds of his coat. "Stay down," Eldridge whispered. Across the aisle, Mrs. Sterling was clutching her reticule so tight her knuckles were white. She looked at Eldridge with wide, terrified eyes. She opened her mouth to ask a question. "Quiet," Eldridge hissed. Outside, a horse whinnied. Boots crunched on the gravel ballast. "Open it up," a voice shouted. "Open it or we start shooting." The door at the front of the car, the one leading to the baggage car, kicked open. 3 men stepped in. They wore dusters, long and gray, flapping around their legs. They wore flour sacks over their heads, eye holes cut ragged with a knife. They held sawed-off shotguns, the bores looking like twin tunnels into hell. "Everybody reach," the lead bandit roared. "Hands high. You drop 'em, you die." The passengers obeyed. Ranchers, salesmen, a few women, they all raised their hands. They were scared. They knew the drill. Eldridge raised his left hand. He kept his right hand low, near the floor, shielding the gun. The bandits moved down the aisle. One stayed by the door, covering the car. The other 2 walked. They weren't collecting wallets. They weren't asking for watches. They were looking at faces. "Where is he?" the leader asked. He stopped at a seat occupied by a fat man in a bowler hat. He grabbed the man's chin, turning his face to the light. "Not him." He shoved the man back. He moved to the next row. He checked a cowboy. He checked a drummer selling patent medicine. "What are they doing?" Percy whispered from the floor. He was huddled between the seats, his pith helmet askew. "Why aren't they robbing us?" "They're shopping," Eldridge said softly. The leader reached the Harringtons' row. He stopped. He looked at Mr. Brooks. He looked at Victoria. He looked at Mrs. Sterling. Then he looked down. At Percy. Percy was trying to look small, but a pith helmet and a safari jacket are hard to hide. The bandit pulled a piece of paper from his pocket. He unfolded it. It was a photograph. A tintype. He held it up next to Percy's face. "Bingo," the bandit said. He reached down. He grabbed Percy by the lapels of his jacket. He hauled him up. "Get up, kid," the bandit said. "Unhand me." Percy squeaked. He tried to slap the man's hand away. "Do you know who I am?" The bandit laughed. It was a muffled, ugly sound under the sack. "Yeah," the bandit said. "I know exactly who you are. You're the payday." He shoved Percy toward the door. "No." Victoria screamed. She stood up. "Leave him alone. Take my jewelry. Take my money." She started pulling off rings, throwing them at the bandit. A diamond necklace. A gold bracelet. The bandit ignored them. He didn't even look down. "Sit down, lady," the bandit said. "Or I'll blow his head off right here." He pressed the muzzle of the shotgun against Percy's neck. Victoria froze. She sank back into her seat, sobbing. Eldridge watched. He measured the shot. 3 bandits. 1 with Percy. 1 covering the aisle. 1 at the door. If he shot the leader, the man at the door would open up with the scattergun. He would spray the car. Women would die. Children would die. Percy would die. 10 guns against 1. In a confined space. With civilians. It was a bad hand. A losing hand. Eldridge kept the Colt low. He didn't move. "Let's go," the leader yelled. He dragged Percy toward the front of the car. "We got the package." "Wait," Mr. Brooks stood up. He was shaking, but he stood. I can pay you. Now. I have cash." The bandit at the door racked the hammers of his shotgun. Click, click. "Sit down, old man," the bandit said. "Before you bleed on the upholstery." Brooks sat. He looked defeated. The bandits backed out. They dragged Percy onto the platform. "Move it," the leader shouted to his men outside. Eldridge heard horses. He heard Percy yelling something about his father. Then the sound of hooves galloping away into the night. The train was silent. Then the crying started. Victoria Harrington was weeping into her hands. Mrs. Sterling was fanning herself frantically. The other passengers were checking their wallets, realizing they hadn't lost a dime, and wondering why they felt so robbed. Eldridge holstered his Colt. He stood up. He walked to the door. He looked out. The fire on the tracks was dying down. The bandits were gone, vanished into the scrub. He looked at the ground near the tracks. Tracks. Lots of them. But one set stood out. A horse with a bar shoe on the left hind foot. "I know that shoe," Eldridge whispered. He had seen it in Iron Point. At the livery stable. On a horse, belonging to a man who played poker with a green visor. Carver. Eldridge stepped back inside. "They're gone," Eldridge said to the car. Mr. Brooks looked up. You didn't do anything." "I stayed alive," Eldridge said. "And I kept you alive." "You had a gun." Victoria shouted. She pointed at his hip. "I saw it. You just sat there." "If I had fired," Eldridge said calmly, "that shotgun would have cut you in half, ma'am. And your nephew would be dead on the floor." "He's gone," she wailed. "They took him." "They took him for ransom," Eldridge said. "That means they need him breathing. If they wanted him dead, they would have shot him here." He walked down the aisle. He picked up the tintype the bandit had dropped. It was a picture of Percy, standing in front of a mansion in Boston, smiling, arrogant. "They knew who to look for," Eldridge said. "They had a picture." He looked at Brooks. "Who knew you were coming?" Eldridge asked. "No one," Brooks said. We just bought tickets." "Someone knew," Eldridge said. "Someone in Iron Point." He pocketed the picture. "We have to go after them," Brooks said. "We have to mount a posse." "The train is stuck," Eldridge said. "The tracks are blocked. We aren't going anywhere until we move those logs." "Then move them," Victoria yelled. "Do something." Eldridge looked at her. He looked at the soft, terrified faces of the city slickers. "I'm going to move the logs," Eldridge said. "Then we're going to limp into Iron Point. And then we'll talk about a posse." He walked out. He jumped down onto the ballast. He walked to the fire. The conductor and the brakeman were already there, trying to leverage the ties off the rails with a crowbar. They looked scared. "Need a hand?" Eldridge asked. "They took a kid," the conductor said. "Just grabbed him." "I saw." Eldridge grabbed a tie. It was hot, smoking. He heaved. He moved the wood. He cleared the track. But his mind wasn't on the logs. It was on the bar shoe. And the tintype. Carver had robbed the train. But Carver was a gambler. He didn't plan kidnappings. He didn't have photographs of rich kids from Boston. Someone else had set this up. Someone who knew the schedule. Someone who knew the passengers. Eldridge looked back at the train. He thought about the sheriff. Bullock. The man who had refused a prisoner because of a budget. The man who had let 2 shooters go free. The game is rigged, Eldridge whispered. He threw the last log into the ditch. Clear, Eldridge yelled. He climbed back onto the train. The engine hissed. The wheels turned. They were moving again. Back to Iron Point. Back to the beginning. Eldridge sat down. He pulled his hat low. He wasn't a contractor anymore. He was a man who had seen a crime he couldn't stop, and that stuck in his craw like a piece of bad meat. He was going to find Percy Harrington. Not for the money, but because nobody pointed a shotgun at a woman while Eldridge Sample was in the room and got away with it. Chapter 10. Percy Harrington didn't fight. He didn't have the instinct for it. When the bandit grabbed him by the collar of his safari jacket, he didn't throw a punch or kick out. He just stiffened like a rabbit caught in a snare. "Let go of me," Percy shrieked. His voice was high, cracking with indignation that hadn't yet curdled into terror. "I demand you unhand me." "You can demand all you want, Sonny," the bandit leader said. He was a big man, smelling of wet wool and horse sweat. He shoved Percy toward the door. "Right now, you're just cargo." Victoria Harrington stood up. She was trembling, but her chin was high. She looked at Eldridge Sample, who was sitting on the floor, his Colt hidden under his coat. "Do something," she hissed. Eldridge looked at her. He looked at the 3 shotguns covering the car. He looked at the 10 men waiting outside on horses. "Sit down," Eldridge said. "You're a coward." "I'm alive," Eldridge said. "And so are you. Let's keep it that way." The bandit leader dragged Percy onto the platform between the cars. Percy stumbled, grabbing the railing. The wind whipped his pith helmet off. It tumbled away into the dark, a white speck vanishing in the brush. "Wait," Percy yelled. He grabbed the doorframe, resisting. "You don't know who I am." The bandit paused. He looked at Percy. He pulled the tintype from his pocket again, checking the face in the lantern light. "I know who you are," the bandit said. "You're Percy Harrington, son of Silas Harrington. Railroad money. Lots of it." "My father," Percy stammered. "My father will pay you. Whatever you want. Just let me go." The bandit laughed. It was a harsh sound. "That's the idea, kid. He pays. We let you go. But first, you take a ride." He pistol-whipped Percy. It wasn't a hard blow, just enough to stun him. Percy went limp. The bandit caught him, throwing him over his shoulder like a sack of grain. "Let's ride," the leader shouted to his men. They jumped from the train. They threw Percy onto a spare horse, tying his hands to the saddle horn. They mounted up. Eldridge stood up. He walked to the door. He peered out into the night. The bandits were wheeling their horses. They were laughing, shouting to each other. They weren't afraid of pursuit. They knew the train was stuck. They knew the passengers were unarmed sheep. Eldridge scanned their faces. The flour sack masks were slipping. He saw the leader clearly for a second as he turned his horse. The mask had shifted. Eldridge saw a scar on the man's cheek, a long, jagged line running from his ear to his jaw. And he saw the horse. A big bay with a white stocking on the left hind leg. "Carver," Eldridge whispered. It wasn't Carver. Carver was a gambler in Iron Point. This man was rougher, dirtier. But the horse. Eldridge had seen that horse before, tied in front of the Iron Horse Saloon. Carver's horse, Eldridge corrected. Ridden by someone else. The bandits spurred their mounts. They galloped away from the tracks, disappearing into the scrub brush, heading south toward the hill country. The train was silent. Then the wailing started. Mrs. Sterling had fainted. Mr. Brooks was fanning her with his hat, looking pale and useless. Victoria was staring at the open door, tears streaming down her face, ruining her makeup. "They took him," she whispered. "They just took him." Eldridge walked back to his seat. He picked up his hat. He dusted it off. "He's insurance," Eldridge said. Victoria spun on him. "Insurance? He's a person. He's my brother." "To them, he's a check," Eldridge said. "A blank check signed by your father." "You could have stopped them," she accused. "You had a gun. I saw it." "If I had used it," Eldridge said, "we'd be having this conversation in hell. There were 10 of them, ma'am. And 1 of me. And a car full of people who don't know which end of a gun the loud noise comes out of." He looked at the other passengers. They were cowering. They were relieved. They were glad it wasn't them. "We have to go after them," Brooks said. He stood up, his knees shaking. "We have to form a posse." "With what?" Eldridge asked. "Canes and parasols?" "We'll get horses." "At the next town." "The next town is Iron Point," Eldridge said. "And the horses there are tired." He walked to the rear of the car. He looked out the window. The fire on the tracks was dying down. The logs were still blocking the way, but the train crew was out there now, heaving them aside with crowbars. "We're moving," the conductor shouted from outside. "Clear the track." The train lurched. The whistle blew. Eldridge sat down. He crossed his arms. He thought about the scar on the leader's face. He thought about the horse. Carver's horse. But not Carver. Someone borrowed the horse. Or someone hired the horse. Why? Eldridge asked himself. Why would a local gambler loan his mount to a train robber? Unless the gambler was in on it. Unless the whole town was in on it. He looked at the city slickers. They were huddled together, weeping, planning, panicking. "They knew," Eldridge said softly. "What?" Brooks asked. "They knew he was on the train," Eldridge said. "They had a picture. A tintype. That means someone told them. Someone sent word ahead." "Who?" "Someone who saw you buy tickets," Eldridge said. "Someone who saw you get on. Someone who knew you were rich and stupid enough to come out here looking for trouble." He looked at the empty seat where Percy had been. "You found it," Eldridge said. The train gathered speed. It rattled through the dark, carrying them back to Iron Point. Back to the sheriff who didn't like loans. Back to the gambler who lost a hand. Eldridge touched the money in his pocket. $40. It wasn't enough. Not for this. But he had a feeling the price of admission was about to go up. "Sit tight," Eldridge told them. "We're going back to the start." Chapter 11. The sound of the galloping horses faded into the scrub, leaving a vacuum in the passenger car that was instantly filled by the sound of Mrs. Sterling discovering her lungs. She screamed. It wasn't a word. It was a high, sustained note of pure, operatic terror that vibrated the glass in the windows. She sat rigid in her seat, her eyes rolled back, her hands clutching the lace at her throat like she was trying to strangle herself. Mr. Brooks flapped his hands at her. "Elizabeth! Please. Compose yourself." She didn't compose herself. She took a breath and did it again. Victoria Harrington didn't scream. She stood in the aisle, gripping the back of the seat so hard her fingernails dug into the upholstery. She stared at the open door where her husband, or was it her brother? No, Percy was the son, the heir, where Percy had vanished. Her face was pale, stripped of the color that the heat had put there earlier. "They took him," Victoria said. Her voice was flat, shocking against the backdrop of her aunt's wailing. "They just picked him up and took him." Eldridge Sample sat in his seat. He picked up his hat from the floor where it had fallen during the initial commotion. He dusted it off with his sleeve. He didn't look at the women. He looked at the conductor. The conductor was a man named Miller. No relation to the other Millers Eldridge had met in this territory. It was a common name for men who wanted to be someone else. He was standing by the wood stove, holding a lantern that shook in his grip. His cap was askew. "Do something," Brooks yelled, turning on the railroad man. He grabbed Miller by the lapels of his uniform coat. "You're the conductor." "Conduct." "Sir, unhand me," Miller stammered. I can't. They have Percy. They have Mr. Harrington's son. You have to stop them." "Stop them with what?" Miller pushed Brooks away. "My ticket punch? Those men had shotguns, mister. Sawed-off 10s. You want me to run into the brush and ask them for a fare? You have a crew," Brooks shouted. He pointed to the brakeman, who was cowering near the water cooler. "You have men. Go after them." "We aren't cavalry," Miller said. He straightened his coat. "We run a train. And right now, the train is stopped." "I'll pay you," Brooks said. He reached for his wallet. "I have money. I'll give you $100 each. Just go." Miller looked at the wallet. He looked at the black square of the open door. "You couldn't pay me enough to walk into that dark," Miller said. "Not tonight. Not with Carver or whoever that was riding point." Eldridge watched. It was the same old song. Money trying to buy courage, and finding out the market was closed. He looked at Victoria. She wasn't looking at the door anymore. She was looking at him. "You," she said. She walked down the aisle. Her skirts rustled. She stopped in front of him. "You're a gunfighter," she said. "I'm a passenger," Eldridge said. "You have a gun. You hit that man in the saloon. You shot the men in the hotel." She pointed a trembling finger at his chest. "Why are you sitting there?" "Because the train isn't moving," Eldridge said. "Get a horse," she yelled. "There are horses in the baggage car. Take one. Go after him." "Those horses belong to the army," Eldridge said. "Or to the railroad. Stealing one is a hanging offense. And riding a strange horse into the pitch black against 10 men who know the terrain is a suicide pact." "You're afraid," she spat. "I'm prudent," Eldridge said. "There's a difference. Prudence keeps you breathing. Fear makes you loud." He looked at Mrs. Sterling, who was now sobbing into a handkerchief that smelled of lavender salts. "You want to help him?" Eldridge asked Victoria. "Shut her up. She's giving me a headache." Victoria stared at him. She looked like she wanted to slap him. Her hand twitched. Eldridge didn't move. He just watched her hand. She dropped it. She turned and walked back to her aunt. She said something sharp, low. Mrs. Sterling choked on a sob and went silent, rocking back and forth. The train lurched. A grinding screech of metal echoed from the undercarriage. The car jumped backward a foot, throwing Brooks into a seat. "We're reversing," the conductor said. He sounded relieved. Engineer got the logs clear enough to back out. "Back out?" Brooks scrambled up. "We can't go back. We have to go forward. To Kansas City. To the authorities." "The track is blocked ahead," Miller said. "We can't go forward until the section gang clears the timber. We're going back to Iron Point. It's the only switch." "But that's away from them," Brooks said. "You're taking us away from him." "I'm taking you to a telegraph office," Miller said. "Unless you want to walk to Kansas." The train jerked again. It began to roll. Slowly at first, the wheels clicking over the joints of the rails with a hesitant rhythm. Clack, clack, clack. Eldridge settled into his seat. He pulled his hat down. The interior of the car was a landscape of misery. The lamps flickered, casting long shadows that jumped with the motion of the train. The air smelled of coal smoke and fierce sweat. Brooks sat across from him, wringing his hands. "What will they do to him?" Brooks whispered. "Percy. He's not strong. He has asthma." "They won't kill him," Eldridge said from under his hat. "How do you know?" "Because dead men don't cash checks. They took him for ransom. That means they need him alive to sign the note." "They hit him," Brooks said. "With the pistol." "They woke him up," Eldridge said. "He was living in a dream where his name mattered. Now he knows it doesn't. That's a hard lesson, but it's better than a bullet." The train picked up speed. It wasn't the confident rush of the outbound journey. It was a limping retreat. The engine strained in reverse, pushing the cars instead of pulling them. The whistle blew, a mournful, lonely sound that drifted out over the empty scrubland. Eldridge looked out the window. He couldn't see anything but his own reflection in the glass. A man in a cheap suit with a face that looked like it had been carved out of driftwood. He thought about the bar shoe. Previous experience said a gambler didn't rob trains. Gamblers liked air conditioning and free drinks. Robbing a train meant dust, sweat, and sleeping on the ground. Carver loaned the horse, Eldridge thought. Or he rented it. To who? Someone who knew the schedule. Someone who knew the Harringtons were on board. He looked at Brooks. "Who bought the tickets?" Eldridge asked. Brooks looked up, startled. "I did. In St. Louis." "Who did you talk to in Iron Point?" "No one. We just changed trains. We had a layover." "How long?" 4 hours. We ate at the hotel." Percy went to the telegraph office to wire his father that we had arrived safely. "The telegraph office," Eldridge said. "Yes. Why? Did he say anything else in the wire? About who he was?" "He might have," Brooks said. "Percy is proud of his name. He likes people to know." Eldridge nodded. "The telegraph operator. Or someone listening in the office. Or someone reading the wire on the other end. Information leaked like water in a cheap bucket." "It was a setup," Eldridge said. "From the minute you stepped off the platform." "The sheriff," Brooks said. "Sheriff Bullock. We met him. He seemed helpful. He recommended the hotel." "Bullock," Eldridge said. He remembered the sheriff refusing the loan. He remembered the sheriff letting the shooters go. No, he hadn't seen that yet. But he remembered the sheriff's eyes. Small. Greedy. The train rattled on. The miles dragged. Victoria Harrington came back to his seat. She sat down opposite him, ignoring Brooks. She had composed herself. Her face was set in a hard porcelain mask. "You know who did this," she said. "I have a guess." "Will you get him back?" "I'm not a lawman, Mrs. Harrington. I'm a passenger with $40 in his pocket." "I have money," she said. She reached into her bodice. She pulled out a small velvet pouch. She opened it. Diamonds. A ring. A brooch. "This is worth $5,000. Maybe more." Eldridge looked at the stones. They glittered in the lamplight. Cold fire. "Put them away," Eldridge said, "before someone else decides to rob the train." "Take them," she said. "Hire yourself." "I don't work for jewelry." "Then what? What do you want?" "I want to get my horse," Eldridge said. And then I'll see which way the wind blows." She stared at him. She didn't understand him. To her, everything was a transaction. You paid money, you got service. She didn't understand a man who operated on a currency of spite and curiosity. You're a hard man, she said. The ground is hard, Eldridge said. You adapt or you break. The train began to slow. Lights appeared outside the window. Scattered yellow squares in the blackness. Iron Point. The train hissed into the station. It backed into the siding with a final, jarring thud. End of the line, the conductor yelled. Everybody out. Eldridge stood up. He grabbed his saddlebags. He walked to the door. He stepped out onto the platform. The town was exactly as he had left it. The Iron Horse Saloon was still noisy. The mud was still deep. The smell of the stockyards was still thick in the air. But it felt different. It felt like a trap that had already sprung. He walked down the steps. Brooks and the women followed him, a train of ducklings following a badger. Where are you going? Brooks asked, trotting to keep up. Livery, Eldridge said. To get my bay. We're coming with you, Victoria said. Suit yourself. It smells like manure. Eldridge walked toward the stable. He looked across the street at the jailhouse. There was a light in the window. He stopped. He looked at the window. He looked at the shadows. He had a feeling. A bad one. Change of plan, Eldridge said. He turned toward the jail. Where are we going now? Brooks complained. To see why the sheriff isn't out here looking for bandits, Eldridge said. He walked to the jailhouse door. He didn't knock. He pushed it open. Bullock was sitting at his desk. He was eating a steak. He looked up, a fork halfway to his mouth. He didn't look surprised. He looked annoyed. You again, Bullock said. Thought you went to Kansas City. Train broke down, Eldridge said. We hit a log. Bad luck, Bullock said. He put the steak in his mouth. Eldridge looked at the cell block. The door was open. He walked back. Cell 1 was empty. Cell 2 was empty. The cowboy and the clerk were gone. Eldridge walked back to the desk. He leaned his knuckles on the wood. Where are they? Eldridge asked. Who? The men who shot up my room. The men you locked up this morning. Bullock swallowed. He wiped his mustache. I let him go, Bullock said. The silence in the room wasn't heavy. It was sharp. It felt like the edge of a knife. You let them go, Eldridge repeated. I didn't think you were coming back, Bullock said. He shrugged. Figured you'd be in Kansas City by now. No witness, no charges. County can't afford to feed men for no reason. I told you I was coming back. Yeah, well, Bullock said, cutting another piece of meat. I didn't believe you. Eldridge looked at the sheriff. He looked at the fat neck, the tin star. He realized then that the kidnapping wasn't just a robbery. It was a permission slip signed by the law. And now the shooters were loose. You shouldn't have done that, Sheriff, Eldridge said softly. Why not? Because now I'm back, Eldridge said. And I'm not leaving until the count is right. Chapter 12. Sheriff Bullock cut another piece of steak. He used a knife that looked like it belonged in a boot, not on a dinner table, sawing through the gristle with a rhythmic squeaking motion against the tin plate. He put the meat in his mouth, chewed slow, and looked at Eldridge Sample standing in the doorway. The Count, Bullock said, talking around the beef. You mean the two boys I locked up? I mean the two men who tried to kill me, Eldridge said. The ones who put 4 holes in a hotel mattress. Eldridge walked into the room. He kicked the door shut behind him. The sound made the lamp flame jump in the glass chimney. He walked past the desk to the cell block. He wanted to see it, up close. He wanted to smell the absence. Cell 1 was open. The blanket was folded on the cot, neat, like nobody had ever slept there. Cell 2 was the same. The bucket was dry. Clean, Eldridge said. My swamper came in this morning, Bullock said. He does good work for a drunk. Eldridge turned around. He leaned against the iron bars of the empty cage. He crossed his arms. He looked at the sheriff. You let them go, Eldridge said. I released them on their own recognizance, Bullock corrected. He wiped a drip of grease from his chin with his thumb. There's a difference. Legal difference. They tried to murder a man in his sleep. Allegedly, Bullock said. I didn't see it. I just saw 2 locals bleeding on my floor, and a stranger telling me a story. And then the stranger got on a train and left the county. I told you I was coming back. People say a lot of things when they're holding a ticket, Bullock said. Usually, once they see the back end of Iron Point, they don't turn around. I figured you were halfway to Kansas City, spending your winnings. So you opened the door. I looked at the budget, Bullock said. He took a sip of coffee from a stained mug. County pays 50 cents a day to feed a prisoner. Doctor charges $2 a visit to change bandages. I did the math. Without a complaining witness, without you. I was just spending tax money to warehouse 2 voters. Voters, Eldridge said. Is that what you call back shooters in this town? They live here, Bullock said. He pointed the steak knife at Eldridge. You don't. That makes them voters, and you a transient. In my book, transients don't get to dictate policy. Eldridge walked back to the desk. He stood over the sheriff. He cast a shadow across the plate. Where are they? Eldridge asked. Home, I suspect. Joe, that's the cowboy. He's probably nursing that shoulder. The clerk, well, he'll be limping for a while. You shot him in the meat. They're angry men, Bullock. They're sore, Bullock agreed. Getting shot tends to make a man cranky. Not cranky, Eldridge said. Vengeful. He placed his hands on the desk. He leaned down until he was eye level with the sheriff. You ever think to yourself, Eldridge said softly, that those 2 men are the kind that would sit there and simmer? That they'd sit in the dark, hurting, drinking bad whiskey, and thinking about the man who put them down? I expect they are, Bullock said. He didn't blink. But I figured you wasn't coming back this way, so there weren't nothing to worry on. If you were in Kansas, their hate was just talk. I'm not in Kansas. I see that, Bullock said. Which is unfortunate. For everyone. Unfortunate for you, Eldridge said. Because now you have a problem. You have a complaining witness. You have the man they tried to kill standing in your office. I don't see a warrant, Bullock said. I don't see a judge. I don't need a judge to tell you to do your job. Rearrest them. Bullock laughed. It was a wheezing, wet sound. He put the knife down. You want me to go out there, in the middle of the night, and drag 2 injured local boys out of their beds because a drifter missed his train connection? Bullock shook his head. Not gonna happen. I'm eating my dinner. You're eating a bribe, Eldridge said. Bullock stiffened. His hand drifted toward the drawer where he kept his hideout gun. Careful, Eldridge said. I'm already in a bad mood. Bullock kept his hand on the table. You got a big mouth, Sample. I got eyes, Eldridge said. I see a sheriff who sends a rich family to a hotel where the telegraph operator listens to the wire. I see a sheriff who refuses to hold a train robber. And I see a sheriff who opens the cage for 2 killers the minute the train whistle blows. You accusing me of something? I'm accusing you of being comfortable, Eldridge said. You like things quiet, You like the money flowing. Carver runs the games. You run the jail. And when outsiders come in and mess up the flow, you flush them. Carver is a businessman. Carver is a thief who rents horses to train robbers. Bullock paused. He picked up a piece of bread and mopped up the blood on his plate. You talking about the Harrington boy? Bullock asked. News travels fast. Train crew came running in here 10 minutes before you did, Bullock said. Screaming about a kidnapping. Said they took the tycoon's son. They did. Bad business, Bullock said. He ate the bread. Railroad won't like that. They'll send agents. They won't have to, Eldridge said. I'm here. You. Bullock smirked. You gonna take on the whole gang? For what? Another $40? For the principal, Eldridge said. And because those 2 men you let go, they're going to come looking for me. And when they do, I don't want to be looking over my shoulder while I'm tracking the kid. That sounds like a personal problem, Bullock said. Eldridge looked at the fat man. He looked at the tin star that was tarnished around the edges. There was no law here. There was just a man with keys and a gun who wanted to finish his steak. You're right, Eldridge said. It is personal. He straightened up. He adjusted his coat. I'm going to find the boy, Eldridge said. And I'm going to find the men who took him. But if I see Joe the cowboy or that clerk, if I see them on the street, I'm not going to arrest them this time. Is that a threat? It's a forecast, Eldridge said. He turned to the door. Sample, Bullock called out. Eldridge stopped. He didn't turn. Iron Point is a dangerous town, Bullock said. Accidents happen. Men trip. Guns go off. You walk careful. I always walk careful, Eldridge said. That's why I'm still walking. He pushed the door open and stepped out onto the boardwalk. The night air was cool, but it didn't clean the taste of the sheriff's office out of his mouth. The street was quiet. The train sat hissing at the depot, a dark iron monster that had brought him back to the scene of the crime. Eldridge scanned the shadows. Joe and the clerk were out there. Hurt. Angry. And now, thanks to Bullock, free. They knew he was back. The train coming back to town was news. The whole town knew. They'll be waiting, Eldridge whispered. He touched the Colt. He looked down the street toward the general store. He needed supplies. He needed ammunition. He needed coffee. And he needed to find the city slickers before they did something stupid, like try to hire the sheriff. Babysitting, Eldridge muttered. He stepped off the boardwalk into the mud. He walked down the center of the street, keeping away from the dark alleys, keeping his eyes moving. Chapter 13. The mud in the street was slick, skimming over hard-packed clay that felt like grease under Eldridge Sample's boots. He didn't walk down the center. He stuck to the edge of the boardwalk, using the shadows of the overhangs to break up his outline. He wasn't watching the silver dollar. He wasn't watching the train. He was watching the alley next to the jailhouse. He had walked 50 feet when he stopped. He leaned against a rain barrel, taking a pouch of tobacco from his pocket. He rolled a cigarette by feel, keeping his eyes on the gap between the brick jail and the wooden frame of the harness shop next door. A shadow moved. It wasn't a dog. It was too tall. It detached itself from the wall and struck a match. The flare was brief, shielded by a cupped hand, but it was enough. Eldridge saw the bandage. A white sling holding a right arm tight against a chest. Joe the cowboy, Eldridge whispered. The man blew out the match. The coal of the cigarette glowed, a red eye in the dark. He wasn't going home to nurse his shoulder. He was standing guard. He was waiting for the man who put the hole in him to walk past. Eldridge looked to the other side of the street. The clerk was there. The man with the shot leg. He was sitting on a crate in the recessed doorway of the bank, his bad leg stretched out stiff. He had a shotgun across his lap. Crossfire, Eldridge said. They had set up a kill box right outside the sheriff's door. Eldridge looked back at the jailhouse window. The light was still on. He could see Sheriff Bullock's silhouette. The sheriff was standing by the glass, looking out. He wasn't working. He wasn't reading. He was watching the street. He was waiting for the show. He knows, Eldridge said. It wasn't incompetence. It wasn't laziness. Bullock hadn't released them because he wanted to save the county 50 cents a day. He had released them because he wanted Eldridge dead, and he didn't want to do it himself. The realization hit Eldridge like a cold draft. The sheriff wasn't just looking the other way. He was directing traffic. Eldridge didn't light his cigarette. He crumbled it in his fingers, letting the tobacco fall into the mud. He backed up. He moved silent, retreating into the shadow of the hotel awning. If he walked down the street to the general store now, he'd have to pass between them. The cowboy on the left, the clerk on the right. They'd cut him down before he got 10 yards. He needed a different route. He slipped down the alley beside the hotel. It was narrow, smelling of lye and kitchen slops. He moved to the back of the buildings, wading through the weeds and the trash. He circled wide. He came up behind the harness shop. He could see the cowboy clearly now. The man was leaning against the wall, wincing as he shifted his weight. He was in pain. He was angry. He was simmering, just like Eldridge had told the sheriff. But Eldridge didn't shoot him. If he fired now, the whole town would wake up. Bullock would come running with his deputies, claiming Eldridge murdered a citizen in the dark. The trap would snap shut legally this time. Not yet, Eldridge said. He left them there. He let them wait in the cold, nursing their wounds and their hate. He moved further down the line, cutting through a vacant lot filled with broken wagon wheels. He came out on the main street again, but well past the ambush point. He was near the south end of town now. He looked back. The two gunmen were still waiting. The sheriff was still watching. "You picked a side, Bullock," Eldridge whispered. He turned his back on the jail. He looked at the general store ahead. It was still open, a lantern burning on the porch. He had to get supplies. He had to get the city slickers out of town before Bullock decided they were loose ends too. Eldridge stepped onto the boardwalk. He checked his Colt. The game had changed. It wasn't about a bounty anymore. It was about a sheriff who used killers as deputies and a town that was rigged to blow. He pushed the thought away. Focus on the gear. Focus on the trail. He walked toward the store, the mud sucking at his heels, leaving the simmer behind him to boil over later. Chapter 14. The general store in Iron Point smelled of pickle brine, raw denim, and the expensive perfume of women who didn't know they were standing in a combat zone. Eldridge Sample stepped inside. He kept to the wall, scanning the room. The shelves were stocked with the necessities of a hard life: sacks of flour, tins of lard, boxes of nails. A clerk with sleeve garters was measuring out coffee beans on a brass scale. But the center of the room looked like a dressmaker's shop that had exploded. Mrs. Sterling was standing in front of a mirror, propped against a barrel of crackers. She was holding a hat, a wide-brimmed felt monstrosity with a veil, adjusting the angle. "It looks rustic," Mrs. Sterling said. She sounded like she was describing a dead rat. Victoria Harrington was at the counter. She wasn't looking at hats. She was looking at a pair of chaps. Leather batwing chaps with silver conchos down the leg. "They're too big," the clerk said nervously. "Those are for a man, ma'am." A large man. I can belt them, Victoria said. I need protection from the brush. That's what the book said. The book? Eldridge asked. He walked up behind her. Victoria spun around. She saw him. She saw the mud on his boots, the colt on his hip. Mr. Sample, she said. She didn't look relieved. She looked determined. You're back. I'm shopping, Eldridge said. He looked at the chaps. You planning on riding a bronc? Or just scaring the horses? We are equipping ourselves, Victoria said. She pointed to a pile of gear on the counter. A canteen covered in felt. A compass. A Bowie knife with a handle made of staghorn. A coil of rope that looked too thin to hang a dog. You're dressing up, Eldridge corrected. We are preparing for a rescue, Victoria said. Her voice was brittle but hard. Since the local authorities are useless, and you, well, you seem busy with your own affairs. My affairs involve staying alive, Eldridge said. You should try it. He looked at Mrs. Sterling. That veil, Eldridge said. It'll catch in the mesquite. Rip your hat off. Or your head. Mrs. Sterling sniffed. It keeps the gnats away. The insects in this country are voracious. Wait until you meet the men, Eldridge said. He walked past them to the back of the store. He found the ammunition shelf. He grabbed 2 boxes of .45 long Colt. He grabbed a sack of coffee. A tin of peaches. He set them on the counter next to Victoria's pile of toys. You can't go out there, Eldridge said. Not in those clothes. Not with that gear. We aren't asking for your permission, Victoria said. We're asking for the bill. She looked at the clerk. And a rifle. A Winchester. The one in the window. The clerk looked at Eldridge. He looked at the woman. Ma'am, that's a .73. It kicks. I'll manage. Sell her the gun, Eldridge told the clerk. Maybe she'll shoot her foot off before she gets out of town. Save us all a lot of trouble. Victoria glared at him. You think we're helpless. I think you're rich, Eldridge said. And I think you're bored. And I think you don't know the difference between a novel and a ransom note. They took Percy, she snapped. They took him because of his name. Because of his father. We have to get him back. You get him back by paying, Eldridge said. Not by playing cowboy. The door to the store banged open. Mr. Brooks ran in. He was out of breath, his tweed suit disheveled, his face red and sweating. He was clutching a piece of paper in one hand and a thick canvas envelope in the other. He saw them. He ran to the counter. I got it, Brooks gasped. He leaned against the wood, wheezing. The bank, the wire came through. He looked at Eldridge. Mr. Sample, Brooks said. Thank God you're here. I'm just buying beans, Eldridge said. We need you, Brooks said. He put the envelope on the counter. It hit with a heavy, solid thud. The sound of money. Brooks opened the flap. He pulled out a stack of bills. Greenbacks. Crisp, new, smelling of ink and the Federal Reserve. $5,000, Brooks said. The clerk's eyes bugged out. He stopped weighing the coffee. That's the ransom? Eldridge asked. That's the advance, Brooks said. Mr. Harrington, Percy's father, he wired the bank president personally. He authorized unlimited funds. Brooks pushed the money toward Eldridge. Take it, Brooks said. I don't want it. It's a retainer, Brooks said. To negotiate. To deliver the payment. To bring the boy home. I told you, Eldridge said. I'm not a negotiator. You know these men, Brooks said. You know the terrain. You know the sheriff is. He lowered his voice. Compromised. He's crooked as a dog's hind leg, Eldridge said. Exactly. We can't trust him. We can't trust anyone. Brooks looked at the women. But we trust you. Why? Because you told us to go home, Victoria said. She picked up the Winchester the clerk had laid on the counter. A liar would have taken our money and led us into a ditch. You tried to save us. Eldridge looked at the money. It was a brick of cash. Enough to buy a ranch. Enough to disappear. He looked at the chaps. The veil. The useless knife. You're going anyway, Eldridge said. Even if I say no. We are going, Brooks said. We have horses coming from the stable. We have supplies. You have a death wish. We have a duty, Brooks said. He's family. Eldridge picked up a box of cartridges. He weighed it in his hand. He thought about the sheriff watching the street. He thought about the two gunmen waiting in the dark. He thought about the bar shoe on the bandit's horse. If these people rode out alone, they wouldn't make it 5 miles. Carver, or whoever was running this show, would pick them clean. They'd be dead before the sun went down, and the money would be gone. And Percy Harrington would be just another loose end in a shallow grave. Eldridge looked at the money on the counter. Put it away, Eldridge said. What? Brooks blinked. Put the money away. You flash that around here, you won't even make it to the horses. Brooks shoved the bills back into the envelope. He clutched it to his chest. Does that mean? It means I'm expensive, Eldridge said. Name your price. My price is you listen, Eldridge said. You do what I say. When I say it. No arguments. No debates. No stopping to look at the view. He looked at Victoria. And lose the chaps, Eldridge said. They make you look like a rodeo clown. Victoria looked at the chaps. She looked at Eldridge. She didn't argue. She pushed them away. Done, she said. Pay the clerk, Eldridge said. For the ammo. And the coffee. We ride in 10 minutes. He turned and walked out of the store. The street was quiet. Too quiet. The sheriff was still in his office, watching. The gunmen were still in the shadows, simmering. Eldridge touched his Colt. He had a job. He had a posse of fools. And he had a feeling that the only way to save them was to walk straight into the fire they were so eager to find. Chapter 15. The horses the livery boy brought out were a mixed bag of bad habits and good intentions. Mr. Brooks got a roan gelding that looked like it wanted to go back to sleep. Mrs. Sterling was hoisted onto a mare that seemed personally offended by the amount of lace involved in the transaction. Victoria Harrington swung herself onto a paint pony with a surprising amount of grace, though the Winchester scabbard slapped against her leg like a wooden paddle. Eldridge Sample stood by his bay, tightening the cinch. He watched them mount up. They looked like a circus parade that had taken a wrong turn at the Mississippi. This isn't a fox hunt, Eldridge said. We aren't riding to hounds. We're riding to a hole in the ground where men shoot first. We understand the gravity of the situation, Mr. Sample, Brooks said. He was struggling to get his foot into the stirrup, his tweed trousers tight at the knee. We are not children. You're tourists, Eldridge said. That's worse. Children know when to be scared. He walked over to Brooks. He grabbed the man's belt and shoved him upward. Brooks landed in the saddle with a grunt, clutching the horn. The money, Eldridge said. Where is it? In the saddlebag. Brooks patted the leather pouch behind him. Safe. It's not safe until it's back in the bank, Eldridge said. You're carrying a target on your back, the size of a barn door. Eldridge looked at the street. The town of Iron Point was watching. The sheriff, Bullock, was standing on the porch of the jail, a toothpick in his mouth. He looked amused. The two shooters, the cowboy and the clerk, were nowhere to be seen, which meant they were already gone, or getting ready to be. "Sheriff sees you," Eldridge said. "He sees the money. He sees the women." "Let him look," Victoria said. She adjusted her hat, pulling the brim down. She had discarded the veil, but she still looked like she belonged in a park, not a posse. "We have the law on our side. We hired you." "I'm not the law," Eldridge reminded her. "I'm the help." He looked at Brooks again. "Why?" Eldridge asked. "Why come? You can hire men. You can wire the Pinkertons. Why ride into this yourself?" Brooks adjusted his spectacles. He looked at the dusty street. He looked at the saloon, where he had been turned away earlier for trying to order a sherry. "Percy is impulsive," Brooks said. "He's spoiled. But he is my sister's son. Mr. Harrington, he is a powerful man. He builds railroads. He crushes strikes. He eats men like Carver for breakfast." "Carver isn't on a menu," Eldridge said. "Carver is holding a gun." "We know about robbers, Mr. Sample," Brooks said. His voice changed. It lost the nervous tremor. It became the voice of a man who balanced books that included the cost of human misery. "We deal with them every day in Boston. Men who steal with a pen. Men who steal with a contract. They smile while they ruin you." Brooks looked at Eldridge. "We are used to a different kind of robber," Brooks said. "The kind you invite to dinner. These men, Carver, they are honest thieves. They want money. We have money. It's a simple transaction." "You think you can buy them," Eldridge said. "I think everyone has a price," Brooks said. "Even you." Eldridge looked at the bay horse. He looked at the Winchester. "My price is getting you back alive," Eldridge said. "And that price just went up." He walked to the sheriff. Bullock hadn't moved. "You letting them go?" Eldridge asked. "Free country," Bullock said. He spat a splinter of wood. "If they want to have a picnic in the hills, that's their business." "You know who took the boy," Eldridge said. "I know a lot of things," Bullock said. "I know Carver rides a bay horse with a bar shoe. I know he's got friends in the canyon. And I know you're leading 3 sheep to a slaughter. If anything happens to them," Eldridge said, "I'm coming back for you." "You won't come back," Bullock said. He smiled. It was the smile of a man who had already read the end of the book. "Carver don't do refunds." Eldridge turned away. He mounted the bay. He looked at his posse. The banker. The aunt. The sister. They were sitting on their horses, stiff, awkward, sweating in their wool coats. They looked ridiculous. But they were there. "Single file," Eldridge said. "Stay behind me. If I stop, you stop. If I run, you try to keep up." "We shall endeavor to give satisfaction," Mrs. Sterling said, sniffing the air like it offended her personally. "Just don't fall off," Eldridge said. He kicked the bay. They rode out of Iron Point. They passed the Iron Horse Saloon. They passed the general store. They passed the end of the track where the rails simply stopped in the dirt, a promise of progress that hadn't been kept. Eldridge watched the shadows. He watched the alleys. He didn't see the cowboy or the clerk. "They're ahead of us," Eldridge thought. Setting up. He touched the Colt. He wasn't a negotiator. He wasn't a guide. He was a man walking into a trap with a pocket full of fool's gold, and a family that thought money was armor. "Let's go find the boy," Eldridge said to the wind. He led them into the scrub, leaving the town and the law behind, riding toward the hills where the price of a life was about to be negotiated in lead. Chapter 16. The afternoon sun was relentless, beating down on the motley procession as they left the deceptive safety of Iron Point. Eldridge Sample rode the bay at a steady walk, his eyes scanning the horizon, not the trail immediately in front of him. He knew the trail. He knew where it led. He was looking for the watchers. Behind him, the posse strung out in a loose, undisciplined line. Mr. Brooks rode with a grim determination, his knuckles white on the reins, his tweed coat already showing dark patches of sweat. He bounced in the saddle, out of rhythm with the horse, a man fighting the animal rather than riding it. Mrs. Sterling was a study in misery. She sat rigid, her face pinched as if she smelled something foul, which, given the horse she was on, wasn't unlikely. Her lace parasol was folded and strapped to her saddlebags, useless against the pervasive dust. Victoria Harrington rode better. She sat straight, her movements fluid enough to suggest she'd been on a horse before, perhaps in a park or a riding academy. She held the reins lightly, her eyes fixed on Eldridge's back. The Winchester, in the scabbard under her leg, slapped against the horse's flank with a dull thwack-thwack. "Keep them close," Eldridge said over his shoulder. "We are keeping up," Victoria said. Her voice was sharp. "We aren't invalids." "You're loud," Eldridge said. "The horses are shod with iron. On this rock, it sounds like an anvil chorus." He pointed to a ridge line a mile ahead. "We get to the trees," Eldridge said. "Then we rest the horses. 10 minutes. No more." "Rest?" Brooks asked, breathless. "Already?" "You kill the horses in the first hour, you walk the rest of the way," Eldridge said. "And walking in those boots will kill you." They reached the tree line, a scraggly collection of scrub oak and cedar that offered more shadow than shade. Eldridge dismounted. He checked the bay's feet. Clean. The others climbed down. Brooks groaned as his boots hit the ground, grabbing the stirrup leather to stay upright. Mrs. Sterling required assistance, which Brooks provided with a pained expression. Eldridge walked to the edge of the ridge. He looked back at Iron Point. The town was a smudge of smoke and wood in the distance. He could see the glint of sun on a window. The jailhouse. Maybe. He scanned the trail they had just ridden. Empty. "They aren't following," Eldridge whispered. "Who?" Victoria asked. She had come up beside him, dusting off her riding skirt. "The sheriff," Eldridge said. "Or his friends. The shooter and the clerk." "You think they'd come after us?" "I think they'd like to see us dead," Eldridge said. "But they're lazy. They'll wait. Or they've got someone else doing the work." "Someone else?" "Carver," Eldridge said. "He's out there. Somewhere. He has the boy. He has the ransom in mind." "Why didn't they just take the money on the train?" Victoria asked. "Mr. Brooks offered it." "Because a train robbery is a federal crime," Eldridge said. "Kidnapping, that's a negotiation. If they take the money on the train, they have to kill everyone to get away clean. If they take the boy, they get paid and nobody has to die. Unless something goes wrong. Like us coming after them." "Like us," Eldridge agreed. He looked at her. She was sweating, strands of blonde hair escaping her pins, but her eyes were clear. She wasn't panicking. She was angry. "You said you weren't the law," Victoria said. "I'm not." "Then why are you here? Really? It's not just the money. I saw you in the saloon. You didn't even look at the cash you won." Eldridge touched the brim of his hat. "I don't like bullies, Mrs. Harrington. And I don't like men who hide behind badges to do their stealing." "Is that all?" "It's enough." He turned back to the horses. "Mount up," Eldridge ordered. "We're losing the light." They rode on. The terrain grew rougher, the trail narrowing as it wound into the foothills. The sun dipped lower, casting long, deceptive shadows that stretched across the path. Eldridge took the lead, his senses tuned to the environment. The smell of sage, the cry of a hawk, the silence of the insects. He stopped. The bay horse's ears pricked forward. Eldridge held up a hand. The posse behind him pulled up, horses bumping into each other. "What is it?" Brooks whispered loudly. "Quiet," Eldridge hissed. He listened. Nothing. No birdsong. No wind. Just a heavy, unnatural silence hanging over a cluster of boulders 50 yards ahead. It was a choke point. The trail passed between two large outcrops of limestone, forcing riders into single file. "Perfect spot," Eldridge murmured. He scanned the rocks. He looked for the glint of metal, the shape of a hat, the movement of a shadow that didn't belong. He saw it. A boot heel. Just the edge of it, protruding from behind a slab of rock on the left. A worn, run-down heel. The cowboy. Joe. And on the right, a flash of white. A bandage. Or a cast. The clerk. They weren't behind him. They were ahead. They had circled around, or ridden hard while the posse was saddling up. They were waiting. "Ambush," Eldridge said softly. He turned in the saddle. He looked at the city slickers. They were sitting there, exposed, tired, completely unaware that they were about to be cut to pieces. If he rode forward, the first volley would take him. If he turned back, they would shoot the others in the back. He had to draw their fire. He had to make them look at him, and only him. "Mrs. Harrington," Eldridge said. His voice was calm, conversational. "Take that rifle out of the scabbard." "What?" "Take it out. Hold it across your lap. Don't aim it. Just hold it." She fumbled with the leather straps. She pulled the Winchester free. It was heavy in her hands. "Mr. Brooks," Eldridge said, "get off your horse. Pretend to check the cinch. Now." Now. Brooks slid down. He stood by his horse, looking confused. Eldridge faced front. He drew his Colt. He rested it on his thigh, hidden by the swell of the saddle. "Hey!" Eldridge shouted. The sound shattered the silence. "I know you're there, Joe. I can see your boot." The boot disappeared. "You want to do this?" Eldridge yelled. "You want to do this in front of witnesses? In front of rich folks from the East?" "We don't care about witnesses," a voice yelled back. It was Joe, the cowboy. "We care about payback." "Then come out," Eldridge challenged. "Come out and take it." A head popped up from the left rocks. Joe. He had a rifle. "You're dead, Drifter." He fired. The bullet whined past Eldridge's ear, close enough to snap the air. Eldridge didn't flinch. He raised the Colt. He fired. Bang. The shot hit the rock in front of Joe's face, sending stone chips flying. Joe ducked back. "Get down," Eldridge yelled to his posse. "Off the horses." Victoria slid from the saddle, dragging the rifle. Mrs. Sterling screamed, but she managed to fall off her horse into the dirt, which was the safest place to be. From the right, the clerk popped up. He was leaning on a crutch, firing a pistol wild. Eldridge spurred the bay. He didn't ride away. He rode at them. He charged the gap. He needed to close the distance. He needed to get between the shooters and the civilians. "Cover me," Eldridge yelled, though he knew they wouldn't. He galloped toward the rocks. Bullets zipped around him. He fired as he rode, snapping shots at the muzzle flashes. Chapter 17. The bay horse hit the gap in the rocks like a train coming off the rails, all muscle and momentum. Eldridge Sample leaned low over the neck. He didn't aim. He watched the muzzle flash from the left side of the trail. Joe the cowboy popped up from behind a slab of limestone. He worked the lever of his rifle. He wasn't shooting to scare anymore. He was shooting to end the argument that started in a hotel room. "Die!" Joe screamed. He fired. The bullet cut the air inches above Eldridge's head. It snapped like a dry twig. Eldridge didn't pull the rein. He let the horse run straight at the rock. He extended his arm. The Colt was heavy, steady. He fired twice. Bang, bang. The first shot hit the rock, spraying grit into Joe's eyes. Joe flinched, bringing his hands up. The second shot didn't miss. It took Joe in the chest. The impact knocked him backward. He dropped the rifle. He sat down hard in the dirt, his legs splayed out. He looked at the hole in his shirt. He looked surprised. Eldridge didn't stop to check his pulse. He wheeled the bay. The horse spun on its haunches, kicking up dust. The clerk was on the right. He was standing behind a mesquite bush, leaning on his crutch. He held a pistol in his shaking hand. He saw Joe go down. He saw the rider turn toward him. Panic took him. He fired wild. The bullet dug a furrow in the ground 10 feet in front of him. "Stay back," the clerk yelled. He tried to back up, but the crutch slipped on a loose stone. He stumbled. Eldridge closed the distance. He was 20 feet away. He leveled the Colt. The clerk dropped his gun. He threw his hands up. "I quit," the clerk shrieked. "I quit." Eldridge didn't lower the hammer. He looked at the man. This was the man who had kicked in a door at midnight. This was the man who had fired into a sleeping man's bed. "You quit too late," Eldridge said. He fired. The bullet hit the clerk in the center of the forehead. It was a lights-out shot. The clerk didn't scream. He didn't fall. He just crumpled, his legs folding under him, the crutch clattering against the rocks. Eldridge pulled the bay up. The horse was dancing, excited by the noise. Silence rushed back into the canyon, heavy and sudden. Eldridge sat in the saddle. He looked at Joe, dead against the rock. He looked at the clerk, dead in the brush. He ejected the spent shells from the Colt. Clink, clink, clink. He thumbed fresh cartridges in from his belt. He turned the horse. The posse was 50 yards back. They hadn't moved. They were frozen in a tableau of shock. Victoria was standing by her horse, the Winchester dragging in the dirt. Mrs. Sterling was face down in the dust, hands over her ears. Mr. Brooks was staring at the bodies, his mouth open. Eldridge rode back to them. He stopped. He looked at Victoria. "You can get up now," he said to Mrs. Sterling. Mrs. Sterling lifted her head. She saw the quiet. She saw Eldridge. She scrambled up, brushing dust from her heavy dress. "Are they?" Brooks whispered. He couldn't finish the sentence. "They're finished," Eldridge said. Victoria walked toward him. She walked past his horse. She walked to Joe's body. She looked at the blood. It was bright red, soaking into the gray dust. She looked at the open eyes. She turned to look at the clerk. The hole in his head was black and neat. She turned back to Eldridge. Her face was pale, like she had seen a ghost, but her eyes were wide. She wasn't fainting. She was processing. "You killed them," Victoria said. "They were waiting," Eldridge said. "You didn't hesitate. Hesitation is what gets you buried." Brooks walked up. He looked sick. Was that necessary? He dropped his gun. The second one. "He dropped it because he missed," Eldridge said. "If he had hit me, he would have picked it up and shot you. And then he would have shot the women. But he surrendered." He paused, Eldridge corrected. Men like that don't surrender. They just reload. Eldridge dismounted. He walked to Joe's body. He picked up the rifle. It was a Henry repeater. Old, but serviceable. He checked the action. Full. He walked to the clerk. He picked up the pistol. A cheap, nickel-plated revolver. He tossed the pistol into the brush. He kept the rifle. He walked back to the group. He shoved the Henry into the empty scabbard on Brooks's saddle. "Now you have a gun," Eldridge said. Brooks stared at the rifle stock. I don't know if I can use it." "You pull the trigger," Eldridge said. "It does the rest." He looked at Victoria. She was still staring at the bodies. "This is the show," Eldridge said. "This is the Wild West you bought a ticket for. Still want to see the rest?" Victoria looked at him. She took a breath. She smoothed her skirt. "Yes," she said. "Good," Eldridge said. "Because the next ones won't be this easy. These were amateurs with a grudge. Carver is a professional." He mounted the bay. "Let's move," Eldridge said. "Leave them for the coyotes. We have a boy to find." He turned the horse west, riding past the dead men without looking down, leading the pilgrims deeper into the country where the only law was the one you carried in your holster. Chapter 18. The bodies were left where they fell, 2 heaps of bad decisions cooling in the canyon shade. Eldridge Sample didn't look back. He rode the bay horse up the trail, his eyes scanning the rimrock. The ambush had been clumsy, angry work, but it was done. Now the real work started. Behind him, the posse rode in silence. The chatty excitement of the city slickers had evaporated with the gun smoke. Mr. Brooks rode with his head down, staring at the rifle Eldridge had shoved into his scabbard. Mrs. Sterling looked green, swaying slightly in the saddle. But Victoria Harrington rode differently. She wasn't slumped. She wasn't sick. She rode straight, her eyes fixed on Eldridge's back. She had seen death up close, violent and messy, and she hadn't looked away. They rode for an hour, climbing higher into the hills. The sun dipped lower, casting the canyons in deep purple shadow. Eldridge pulled up in a small clearing surrounded by scrub oak. "We stop here," Eldridge said. "Let the horses blow." He dismounted. He checked the bay's hooves. Good iron. The others climbed down. They moved stiffly, the adrenaline crash leaving them shaky. Brooks leaned against his horse, wiping sweat from his face with a silk handkerchief. Is it always like that?" Brooks asked. His voice was thin. "Like what?" Eldridge asked. He loosened the cinch on the bay. "This suddenness. 1 minute, they were shouting. The next—" Brooks swallowed hard. "The next they were gone." "That's how it works," Eldridge said. "It isn't a duel at high noon. It isn't a conversation. It's geometry and speed. You get the angle, you pull the trigger, you go home." "It was brutal," Mrs. Sterling whispered. "Barbaric." "It was survival, ma'am. They came to kill us. We decided not to let them." Eldridge walked over to Victoria. She was standing by her paint pony, holding the reins. She was looking at her hands. They were trembling slightly, but her face was calm. "You didn't scream," Eldridge said. "I didn't have time," Victoria said. She looked up at him. Her eyes were clear blue and hard. "You killed them. Both of them. Without blinking." "I blinked," Eldridge said. "You just didn't see it." "Why did you give Mr. Brooks a gun?" "Because he's a man," Eldridge said. "And men need to be useful." "And me?" Victoria asked. "Am I useful? Or am I just baggage?" Eldridge looked at her. He saw the expensive riding habit, the hat with the feather. But he also saw the way she had watched the bodies. She wasn't fragile. She was just uneducated. "You want to be useful?" Eldridge asked. "I want to help get Percy back. I don't want to just watch. Watching keeps you alive." "Watching got those 2 men killed," Victoria said. "They watched you ride right at them. They hesitated. They hesitated because they were amateurs. Carver isn't an amateur." Eldridge reached into his saddlebag. He pulled out a spare pistol. It wasn't his Colt. It was a smaller gun, a .38 caliber revolver he had taken off a gambler in Kansas City who thought 3 aces beat a straight flush. He held it out, butt first. "Take it," Eldridge said. Victoria looked at the gun. She reached out. Her hand was steady. She took the weight. "It's loaded," Eldridge said. 5 rounds. Hammer on an empty chamber. It kicks, but not like a .45. "You're giving me a gun." "I'm giving you a chance," Eldridge said. "If we hit trouble again, if I go down, you don't wait for Brooks to save you. You use this." "How?" "Point it," Eldridge said. "Squeeze. Don't jerk. Aim for the middle. It's the biggest part." She held the gun. She tested the grip. It looked big in her hand, but she didn't look awkward holding it. "Thank you," she said. "Don't thank me. Just don't shoot me in the back." Eldridge turned to the rest of the group. "Listen up," he said. His voice carried in the quiet clearing. Brooks and Mrs. Sterling looked at him. They looked like children waiting for a scolding. "What you saw back there," Eldridge said, pointing down the trail, "that was the price of admission. You wanted the Wild West. You got it. It's dirty. It's loud. And it smells like blood." He walked toward them. "We're going deeper," Eldridge said. "Carver is in these hills. He has Percy. He has 10 men. Professional men. They won't miss like the cowboy did. They won't panic like the clerk did." "What are you saying?" Brooks asked. "I'm saying the rules have changed," Eldridge said. "This isn't a rescue mission anymore. It's a war. If we find them, there's going to be shooting. Lots of it." He looked at Mrs. Sterling. "If you want to go back," Eldridge said, "now is the time. I can point you toward the main road. It's a long walk, but it's safe." Mrs. Sterling straightened her spine. She looked at the dust on her dress. She looked at Victoria, holding the gun. "I am a Sterling," she said, sniffing. "We do not walk home. We finish the tour." "Suit yourself," Eldridge said. "But from now on, you do exactly what I say. If I say duck, you eat dirt. If I say run, you run until your heart bursts. No arguments. No questions." "Understood," Brooks said. He touched the stock of the rifle Eldridge had given him. He looked a little taller, a little less like a banker, and a little more like a man who might survive. "Good," Eldridge said. He walked back to the bay. He tightened the cinch. "Mount up," Eldridge ordered. They climbed back into the saddles. Victoria tucked the .38 into her belt. She didn't look like a tourist anymore. She looked like someone who had just learned a hard lesson and was ready for the test. Eldridge swung up onto the bay. "We ride until dark," Eldridge said. "Then we camp cold. No fire. No noise." He turned the horse west. He didn't look back at the dead men. He looked ahead, toward the high peaks where Carver was waiting. Chapter 19. The tracks led deeper into the hill country, winding through a maze of arroyos and limestone bluffs that seemed designed to hide men who didn't want to be found. Eldridge Sample rode point. He kept the bay at a steady walk, his eyes on the ground, reading the story written in the dust. Behind him, the posse, Mr. Brooks, Mrs. Sterling, and Victoria Harrington, followed in a silence that was heavy with exhaustion and the lingering shock of the ambush. "They stopped here," Eldridge said. He pulled up in a dry creek bed. The sand was churned, marked by the deep impressions of shod hooves. "To rest?" Brooks asked, his voice rasping. He looked like a man who had aged 10 years in 10 hours. His tweed coat was torn, his face streaked with sweat and dirt. "To wait," Eldridge said. He dismounted. He walked a circle around the tracks. There were 10 horses, plus the one carrying Percy. They had dismounted, smoked, walked around. "They weren't in a hurry," Eldridge said. "They took their time. They knew nobody was right behind them." He found a cigarette butt. He picked it up. He sniffed it. "Cheap tobacco," Eldridge said. "Roll your own." He walked a few feet further. He found something else. A cigar butt. It wasn't cheap. It was a Havana, smoked down to a nub, the ash carefully tapped off against a rock. Eldridge frowned. He rolled the cigar between his fingers. "Carver smoked cigarettes," Eldridge said to himself. "The bandits on the train, they smelled of wet wool and cheap tobacco. This cigar was expensive. It smelled like a backroom deal." He looked at the tracks again. One set of boot prints stood out. They were narrower than the others. The heel was worn down on the outside edge. He had seen that print before. In Iron Point. In the mud outside the jailhouse. "The sheriff," Eldridge whispered. He stood up. He looked back down the trail they had come. "Bullock," Eldridge said. "The sheriff?" Victoria asked. She had ridden up beside him. She looked tired, but her hand was resting on the grip of the .38 in her belt. "What about him?" "He was here," Eldridge said. "Or someone wearing his boots and smoking his brand of cigar." "Why would the sheriff be with the bandits?" Brooks asked. "He's the law." "He's the law that let the shooters go," Eldridge said. "He's the law that didn't form a posse. And now, he's the law that's riding with the kidnappers." "But why?" "Money," Eldridge said. "It's always money. Bullock knew you were coming. He knew who Percy was. Maybe he set it up. Maybe he just took a cut to look the other way. But he's involved." "He's leading them," Victoria said. Her eyes narrowed. "That's why they weren't afraid. That's why they stopped to smoke." "He's not leading them," Eldridge said. "Carver runs the gang. Bullock, he's the insurance. He makes sure the trail stays cold from town. And maybe he's here to collect his share." Eldridge tossed the cigar butt into the brush. "They're moving slow," Eldridge said. "They aren't running. They're waiting." "Waiting for what?" Mrs. Sterling asked. She was slumped over her horse's neck, fanning herself with a limp hand. "For us," Eldridge said. "Or for the money." He looked at the terrain ahead. The creek bed narrowed, heading up into a canyon. The walls were steep, sheer rock. "Box Canyon," Eldridge said. "Up ahead. About 3 miles. Good place to hold a prisoner. Good place to set a trap." "Are we walking into it?" Brooks asked. "We're riding into it," Eldridge said. "But we know it's there. That gives us an edge." He walked back to the bay. He checked the cinch. "Mount up," Eldridge ordered. They rode on. The sun was dropping, casting the canyon in shadow. The air cooled, but the tension rose. Eldridge kept his Winchester across his saddle. He watched the rims. He watched the shadows. He was thinking about Bullock. The fat man with the tin star. The man who ate steak while men bled in his office. He's sloppy, Eldridge thought. Leaving a cigar. Leaving tracks. Or maybe he was just arrogant. Maybe he thought a drifter and a bunch of city slickers would never get this far. He underestimated the view, Eldridge whispered. He looked at Victoria. She was riding straight, her jaw set. She wasn't a slicker anymore. She was a woman with a gun, and a reason to use it. 3 miles, Eldridge said. They moved deeper into the hills, following the trail of a corrupt lawman and a bandit king, riding toward a box canyon where the price of a life was about to be renegotiated. Chapter 20. The shadows in the canyon were long purple fingers stretching across the trail, cooling the air but doing nothing to ease the tension that sat on Eldridge Sample's shoulders like a wet wool coat. He dismounted. The bay blew out a breath, grateful for the pause. "What is it?" Brooks asked, reining his horse in so sharply the animal tossed its head. "Did you see them?" "I saw something," Eldridge said. He knelt in the dust. The ground here was a mix of hardpan and loose shale, unforgiving and loud. But in a small depression shielded by a cluster of prickly pear, there was a patch of soft sand. And in the sand, there was a track. It wasn't a hoof print. It was a boot. Narrower than the ones worn by Carver's men. The heel was worn down on the outside edge, rolling the print slightly to the right. Eldridge touched it. The edge was still crumbling. "Fresh," he said. "Less than an hour." He looked around. He scanned the brush. He saw it. A small, dark object lying near the base of a mesquite bush. He reached in, careful of the thorns, and picked it up. It was a cigar butt. Not the cheap, hand-rolled tobacco the bandits smoked. This was a factory-made cigar, dark wrapper, bitten off at the end. It had been smoked halfway down, and then crushed out under a heel. Eldridge brought it to his nose. It smelled of stale smoke and something sweeter. "Port wine." "Bullock," Eldridge whispered. "Who?" Victoria asked. She had dismounted and was standing beside him, her hand resting on the pistol in her belt. She looked tired, her face streaked with dust, but her eyes were alert. "Sheriff Bullock," Eldridge said. He held up the cigar. "This is his brand. I saw him smoking one, just like it when I dragged the shooters into his office." "The sheriff?" Brooks asked, his voice rising. "But he's in town. He's the law." "He's the law that let 2 men go free to ambush us," Eldridge said. "And now he's out here, riding point for a kidnapper." He stood up. He crushed the cigar butt in his hand, shredding the tobacco. "It wasn't just incompetence," Eldridge said. "It was a setup. The whole thing. The train robbery. The kidnapping." Bullock cleared the deck. "He made sure I was busy with the shooters so Carver could get away clean." "Why?" Mrs. Sterling asked from her horse. She sounded faint. "Why would a sheriff do that?" "Money," Eldridge said. "It's always money." Percy told the telegraph operator who he was. The operator told Bullock. Bullock told Carver. It's a pipeline, and we're just the water flowing through it. "He's leading them," Victoria said. "He's guiding them to a safe spot." "No," Eldridge said. "He's not leading them. He's following. He's making sure nobody else is on the trail. He's the rear guard." He looked back down the canyon. The way they had come. "He's behind us," Eldridge said. The realization hit the group like a physical blow. Brooks spun around, staring at the empty trail. "Behind us?" Brooks squeaked. "You mean he's following us?" "He let the shooters try first," Eldridge said. "When they failed, he decided to come himself. Or maybe he's just coming to collect his share from Carver and make sure there are no witnesses left to tell the judge." "What do we do?" Victoria asked. Her hand tightened on the gun. "Do we ambush him?" "We don't have time," Eldridge said. "If we stop to fight Bullock, Carver gets away. Or worse, Carver hears the shooting and kills the boy." "We're trapped," Brooks said. "Bandits in front. Sheriff behind." "We're not trapped," Eldridge said. We're motivated. He walked back to the bay. He checked the cinch. We push, Eldridge said. We close the gap on Carver. We get to him before Bullock gets to us. And when we get there? Victoria asked. We'll be caught in the middle. When we get there, Eldridge said, swinging into the saddle, we'll make sure Bullock regrets leaving his office. He turned the horse. He looked at the trail ahead. The tracks of the bandit gang were heavy, obvious. They were heading for a notch in the skyline, a narrow pass that led deeper into the rough country. The Box Canyon, Eldridge said. It's through that pass. 3 miles. How do you know? Brooks asked. Because it's the only place a man can defend with 10 guns against a posse. And it's the only place with water. Water, Mrs. Sterling moaned. I would kill for a glass of water. You might have to, Eldridge said. He kicked the bay into a trot. The sun was gone now, leaving the sky a deep bruised purple. The first stars were coming out, cold and indifferent. Eldridge rode with his Winchester across his lap. He kept one eye on the trail ahead, and one eye on the back trail. He felt the weight of the sheriff's shadow pressing on them. Bullock was out there. Fat, corrupt, and dangerous because he had a badge that let him get away with murder. He was coming slow, smoking his cigars, confident that the city slickers were easy prey. He thinks we're sheep, Eldridge whispered to the bay. He doesn't know the sheep bought guns. He looked at Victoria, riding beside him. She wasn't slumping. She was riding with a grim determination, her jaw set. He's wrong, Eldridge said. Chapter 21. The canyon didn't invite you in, it swallowed you whole. The limestone walls rose up 300 feet, sheer and smooth, cutting a notch out of the night sky that was barely wide enough for the stars to peek through. The air was still, heavy with the smell of trapped heat and dry sage. Eldridge Sample reined in the bay horse. He sat in the saddle, listening. The silence was a lie. He could feel it. The kind of silence that happens when everything with a heartbeat is holding its breath. It's a dead end, Brooks whispered from behind him. The banker's voice was thin, trembling. It's a box, Eldridge corrected. One way in. One way out. He looked at the ground. The tracks were clear in the moonlight. The 10 horses had ridden straight in. They hadn't turned around. They hadn't split up. They had ridden into the cul-de-sac and stopped. They're waiting, Eldridge said. He scanned the rimrock. It was too dark to see a sniper, but he knew the angles. If Carver was half the bandit he pretended to be, he had a man up there. Maybe 2. Stay here, Eldridge told the group. He dismounted. He handed the reins to Victoria. If you hear shooting, Eldridge said, don't come running. Get back to the bend in the trail. Wait for me. And if you don't come? Victoria asked. Her hand was on the grip of the .38 in her belt. Then you ride for Iron Point, Eldridge said. And you don't stop for anything. He walked forward. The canyon floor was littered with boulders the size of wagons, debris from a rockfall centuries ago. Eldridge moved from shadow to shadow, his boots making no sound on the sand. He rounded a large slab of granite. The end of the canyon opened up into a natural amphitheater. The moon shone directly into the bowl, illuminating the scene like a stage set. In the center of the clearing, a single mesquite tree stood twisted and gnarled. Percy Harrington was tied to it. He was sitting in the dirt, his hands lashed behind the trunk. He was still wearing his safari jacket, but it was torn and dusty. His head hung low. He looked broken. There was no fire, no camp. Just the boy and the tree. Bait, Eldridge whispered. He scanned the shadows at the base of the cliffs. He saw the glint of a bit chain. The horses were tied in a string against the far wall. 10 of them, saddled, ready to ride. But where were the men? Eldridge looked at the rocks surrounding the clearing. There were plenty of places to hide. Caves, crevices, overhangs. Carver was watching. He was waiting for the negotiator to walk into the light. He was waiting for the money. He expects one man, Eldridge thought. One man with a bag of cash. Eldridge stepped back into the shadow of the granite slab. He needed to change the script. He walked back to the group. They were huddled together, horses shifting nervously. "He's there," Eldridge said. "Tied to a tree. Alone." "Alone?" Brooks asked, hopeful. "It's a trap, Arthur. They're in the rocks. They're waiting for you to walk out there with the money." "So, what do we do?" Mrs. Sterling asked. "Do we pay them?" "If we pay them," Eldridge said, "they take the money and they kill us. No witnesses. That's the way this works." "We fight," Victoria said. "We don't just fight," Eldridge said. "We cheat." He looked at the horses. He looked at the city slickers. They weren't gunfighters. They weren't soldiers. But they could make noise. "Mrs. Harrington," Eldridge said, "can you shoot that rifle without hitting your own foot?" "I told you I could." "Good. Give it to Mr. Brooks." "What?" "Give him the rifle." "Brooks, take it. Go up the trail, about 50 yards. Find a rock. Shoot at the moon." "The moon." Brooks blinked. "Make noise," Eldridge said. "Lots of it. Yell. Scream. Fire 3 shots, wait a second, fire 3 more. Make them think a whole posse just rode in." "A diversion," Victoria said. "A distraction," Eldridge said. "While they're looking at you, I'm going to take their horses." "Their horses?" Mrs. Sterling asked. "Men on foot in this country are just targets," Eldridge said. "I take their mounts, they panic. They panic, they make mistakes." He looked at Victoria. "You," Eldridge said. "You come with me." "Me?" "I need someone to cover my back. And you're the only one who looks like you might actually pull the trigger." Victoria straightened. She pulled the .38. "I'm ready." "Stay low," Eldridge said. "Do exactly what I say. Don't be a hero. Be a ghost." He turned to Brooks. "Go," Eldridge said. "Give us 2 minutes. Then start the war." Brooks nodded. He took the Winchester. He looked terrified, but he turned his horse and rode back down the trail. Eldridge led Victoria into the rocks. They moved along the canyon wall, keeping to the deepest shadows. They reached the edge of the clearing. Percy was still slumped against the tree. 2 minutes, Eldridge whispered. He watched the cliff face. A shadow moved. High up. A man with a rifle, shifting position. "Sniper on the ledge," Eldridge noted. Another movement, near the horses. A man standing guard, smoking a cigarette. He was hidden by the bulk of the animals, but the smoke gave him away. Crack. 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 Gunfire erupted from down the canyon. Brooks was doing his job. He was shouting, too. "Surround them. Cut off the exit." It sounded convincing. In the clearing, heads popped up from behind rocks. "What the hell is that?" a voice yelled. "Posse," another shouted. "They're behind us." Carver's voice boomed from a cave near the back. "Hold your fire. Let's see what they got." The guard by the horses stepped out, trying to see down the trail. "Now," Eldridge said. He broke cover. He sprinted for the horses. He didn't shoot. He ran. He reached the string of mounts. He pulled his knife. He slashed the lead rope. "HYA," Eldridge yelled. He slapped the rump of the nearest horse. The animals, already spooked by the gunfire, panicked. They reared, breaking free. They stampeded. They didn't run toward the exit. Brooks was shooting there. They ran into the clearing. They ran right through the ambush zone. "Horses loose," the guard yelled. He raised his gun. Eldridge shot him. The colt barked. The guard went down. "Cover!" Eldridge yelled to Victoria. She was right behind him. She dropped behind a water trough. She rested the .38 on the wood. The canyon exploded. Carver's men opened fire. They shot at the horses. They shot at the noise. They shot at shadows. Eldridge dove behind a rock. Chapter 22. The canyon floor was a bowl of dust and panic. Eldridge Sample crouched behind a boulder, the Colt in his hand bucking as he fired a shot toward the muzzle flashes near the cave mouth. He wasn't aiming to kill, he was aiming to keep heads down. To his right, Victoria Harrington was doing the same. She was surprisingly steady. She rested the barrel of the .38 on the water trough and squeezed the trigger with a rhythm that said she was counting her shots. Bang, pause, bang. But the real chaos was the horses. The 10 mounts Eldridge had cut loose were tearing around the clearing like a cyclone of horseflesh. They were terrified by the gunfire, the shouting, and the smell of blood from the dead guard. They kicked up a blinding cloud of dust that turned the moonlight into a milky haze. "Don't let them settle," Eldridge yelled to Victoria. "Keep shooting." "I'm shooting," she yelled back. "I'm almost out." "Reload." "Don't look at the target, look at the cylinder." In the center of the mayhem, Percy Harrington was screaming. He was still tied to the mesquite tree, but the horses were milling around him, their hooves churning the dirt inches from his legs. "Help! Get them away!" Carver's men were trying to fight the horses and the unseen gunmen at the same time. "Grab the reins," a bandit shouted, lunging for a bay mare. The mare reared, striking out with her forelegs. The bandit scrambled back, cursing. "Forget the horses," Carver roared from the cave. "Kill the shooter. He's by the trough." Carver stepped out. He was a silhouette against the dark opening of the cave. He had a Winchester. He raised it, aiming at Victoria's position. Eldridge saw him. He shifted his aim. He fired. The bullet sparked off the rock face next to Carver's head. Carver flinched, ducking back. "Flank them," Carver yelled. 2 men. Go high." 2 bandits broke from the cover of the rocks on the far side. They started climbing the scree slope, trying to get above Eldridge and Victoria. "They're moving up," Victoria shouted. "I see them," Eldridge said. He looked back down the trail. Mr. Brooks was still there. He was hidden in the rocks near the entrance, firing the rifle Eldridge had given him. He was making noise, just like he was told. Boom, boom, boom. He was shouting orders to an army that didn't exist. "Surround them, boys. Cut off the pass." It was a good performance. It kept the bandits confused. They didn't know if they were fighting 2 people or 20. But the confusion wouldn't last. The dust would settle. The horses would run themselves out or scatter. And then, the numbers would take over. 10 guns against 2. Eldridge needed to change the ground. He looked at the dead guard, the one he had shot when the horses stampeded. He was lying near the trough. He had a bandolier of ammunition across his chest. And something else. Attached to his belt was a pouch. A leather bag that looked heavy. "Dynamite," Eldridge whispered. It was a guess. But bandits hitting trains usually carried mining supplies. Eldridge looked at Victoria. "Cover me," he yelled. "I'm going for the body." "What?" "Just shoot." He broke cover. He sprinted across the open ground, diving toward the dead man. Bullets zipped past him. One tugged at his coat sleeve. He hit the dirt, sliding into the base of the trough. He reached for the pouch. He undid the flap. Sticks of dynamite. 3 of them. And a coil of fuse. Jackpot, Eldridge said. He pulled a stick out. He cut a length of fuse with his teeth. He jammed it into the cap. He struck a match on his boot heel. The fuse hissed. He looked at the climbing bandits. They were halfway up the slope, exposed. Eldridge stood up. He threw the stick. It sailed through the air end over end, the fuse sparking. It landed in the scree, 10 feet above the climbers. Fire in the hole! Eldridge yelled. He dropped back behind the trough. Boom! The explosion shook the canyon floor. A cloud of rock and dust erupted from the slope. The 2 bandits screamed. They lost their footing. They came tumbling down the hill in a landslide of shale and smoke. The horses went wild again. They bolted for the canyon exit, stampeding right past Brooks. Look out! Brooks yelled, his voice cracking. The bandits in the clearing were stunned. The explosion had rattled them. They stopped shooting. Eldridge stood up. He held the second stick of dynamite. He lit it. He threw it toward the cave mouth. It landed just outside. Carver saw it. He dove back inside. Boom! The blast collapsed the entrance overhang. Rocks rained down, blocking the cave. Dust billowed out. They're buried! Victoria shouted. She sounded triumphant. They're pinned, Eldridge corrected. Carver has a back door. He always does. But he's busy right now. He ran to the tree. Percy was covered in dust, coughing. He looked at Eldridge with wide, terrified eyes. You blew up the mountain. Percy squeaked. I knocked on the door, Eldridge said. He pulled his knife. He slashed the ropes binding Percy to the tree. Can you run? Eldridge asked. My legs, they're numb. Then crawl. Get to the trough. Move. He hauled Percy up. He shoved him toward Victoria. Get him. Eldridge yelled to her. Get him out of here. Victoria holstered her pistol. She grabbed Percy's arm. She dragged him. Eldridge stood in the center of the clearing. He reloaded his Colt. The dust was clearing. The horses were gone. The bandits were scattered, wounded, or trapped in the cave. But it wasn't over. A shot rang out from the rim rock. Crack. The bullet hit the ground near Eldridge's boot. He looked up. A man was standing on the high ledge. He wasn't a bandit. He was wearing a badge. Sheriff Bullock. He had a rifle. He was smiling. You're making a mess, Sample. Bullock yelled down. I'm gonna have to clean it up. He worked the lever of his rifle. Eldridge dove for cover behind the tree. The sheriff, Eldridge said. He joined the party. Chapter 23. Eldridge Sample broke cover from behind the water trough. He moved low and fast, his boots digging into the churned earth. He didn't run straight at the cave mouth where Carver was pinned. He ran at an angle, heading for a jumble of fallen rocks on the north side of the clearing. Bullets slapped the ground around him, kicking up little geysers of sand. Cover! Eldridge yelled over his shoulder. Victoria Harrington was already shooting. She had reloaded the .38. Her hands were shaking, but she got the cylinder closed. She popped up from behind the trough, fired 2 rounds at the bandits scrambling on the scree slope, and ducked back down. Get him! Mr. Brooks shouted from the canyon entrance. He was still playing the part of the posse, firing the Winchester into the air, making enough noise for 10 men. Eldridge reached the rocks. He slid into a gap between two boulders. He had a clean line of sight to the cave. The entrance was blocked by the rubble from the dynamite blast, but it wasn't sealed. There was a gap near the top, a dark hole where muzzle flashes were spitting out like angry tongues. Carver was in there. Trapped. Angry. "Come out, Carver," Eldridge yelled. "The horse is dead. The game is over. Go to hell, Drifter." Carver's voice echoed from the cave, distorted by the stone. "I got dynamite too. You light a fuse in there, you'll bring the whole mountain down on your head. Better than hanging." Eldridge checked his Colt. 3 rounds. He needed to make them count. He looked up the slope. The 2 bandits he had knocked down with the first stick of dynamite were recovering. They were bruised, covered in dust, but they were finding their feet. One of them had lost his rifle, but the other was bringing a carbine to bear on Victoria's position. "Victoria!" Eldridge shouted. "High right. Watch the slope." She looked up. She saw the man. She didn't freeze. She didn't scream. She raised the pistol. She braced her wrist on the edge of the trough. She fired. The shot was high, hitting the rock above the bandit's head. But it made him flinch. He jerked the trigger, sending his shot wild into the canyon floor. Again. Eldridge yelled. "Lower." She fired again. This time, the bandit yelped. He dropped the carbine, grabbing his leg. He lost his footing on the loose shale and went sliding down the slope, tumbling into a patch of cactus at the bottom. "I got him," Victoria shouted. Her voice was fierce, full of adrenaline and disbelief. "I got him." "Good girl," Eldridge muttered. He turned back to the cave. Carver was trying to clear the rubble. He was shoving rocks aside, making a gap big enough to squeeze through. Eldridge waited. He rested his gun hand on the boulder. A head appeared in the gap. Carver. He was pushing a saddlebag ahead of him. Eldridge fired. The bullet hit the rock, inches from Carver's face. Stone chips sprayed him. Carver ducked back inside, cursing. "You're pinned, Carver," Eldridge yelled. "Throw out the gun." "I'm coming out shooting." "Then you're coming out dead." Suddenly, movement to the left. Another bandit, one Eldridge hadn't accounted for, popped up from behind a dead mesquite bush near the canyon wall. He had been playing dead or just waiting. He had a clear shot at Brooks. The banker was standing in the open now, waving the rifle, yelling orders to his imaginary posse. He didn't see the man on his flank. "Brooks!" Eldridge screamed. "Left." Brooks turned, confused. "What?" The bandit raised his pistol. Eldridge swung the Colt. It was a long shot. 40 yards. Snap shooting. He fired. He missed. The bullet kicked up dirt behind the bandit. The bandit grinned. He steadied his aim on Brooks. Then a shot rang out from the trough. Crack. The bandit jerked. He spun around, clutching his shoulder. He dropped his gun. Eldridge looked at the trough. Victoria was standing up. She held the .38 with both hands, smoke drifting from the barrel. She looked pale, but she was standing tall. I think I hit him," she said. "You saved him," Eldridge shouted. "Now get down." She ducked back as a bullet from the cave whined overhead. Eldridge looked at the cave again. Carver was getting desperate. He was firing blindly through the gap, wasting ammunition. Eldridge needed to close it. He looked at the pouch on the dead guard's belt, the one lying near the trough. There was one stick of dynamite left. "Victoria!" Eldridge yelled. "The bag. Throw me the bag." She looked at the dead guard. She reached out, grabbed the leather pouch, and unhooked it. "Catch." She threw it. It was a good throw, end over end. Eldridge caught it. He pulled out the last stick. He cut the fuse short. "Last hand, Carver," Eldridge said. He lit the fuse. He stood up. He stepped out from the rocks. He wound up and threw. The dynamite sailed through the air. It was a perfect arc. It went right through the gap in the rubble, into the dark of the cave. "Fire in the hole!" Eldridge yelled. He dove for cover. Whump! The explosion was muffled, contained by the stone. But the effect was massive. The ground jumped. Smoke and dust blasted out of the cave mouth like a cannon shot. The roof of the entrance collapsed completely, sealing the cave with tons of rock. Silence returned to the canyon. The dust settled. Eldridge stood up. He walked toward the cave. The entrance was gone. Just a pile of boulders. "Carver," Eldridge called. No answer. Just the settling of stones. He looked around the clearing. The 2 bandits on the slope were gone, run off into the hills. The one Victoria shot was moaning in the brush. The guard was dead. Brooks ran up, panting. "Is it over? Did we get him?" "We buried him," Eldridge said. "Or we locked him in. Either way, he's done." He walked to Victoria. She was leaning against the trough, looking at the gun in her hand. "You okay?" Eldridge asked. She looked up. "I shot a man." "You stopped a killer," Eldridge said. "There's a difference." He took the gun from her, gently. He checked it. Empty. "You did good," he said. "Where's Percy?" Brooks asked, looking around wildly. "He's behind the trough," Victoria said. "Hiding." They found Percy curled in a ball, covered in dust, shaking. "Is the bad man gone?" Percy squeaked. "He's gone, son," Eldridge said. "Time to go home." He helped Percy up. Just then, the sound of hoofbeats echoed from the canyon entrance. Lots of them. Eldridge spun around, reloading his Colt. "More of them?" Brooks asked, terrified. "No," Eldridge said, listening to the rhythm. "That's not bandits. That's a posse." Riders burst into the clearing. 10 men. Wearing badges. Leading them on a fresh horse was Sheriff Bullock. He pulled up, looking at the devastation. He looked at the sealed cave. He looked at Eldridge. He smiled. "Looks like you saved me some work, Sample," Bullock said. Eldridge lowered his gun. He looked at the sheriff's eyes. They weren't relieved. They were cold. "You're late, Sheriff," Eldridge said. "Traffic," Bullock said. He drew his gun. "Now, why don't you folks put your hands up? I think you're under arrest." "For what?" Brooks demanded. "For disturbing the peace," Bullock said. "And for killing my business partner." Chapter 24. Sheriff Bullock didn't ride in like a hero. He rode in like a landlord coming to evict a tenant who was 3 months behind on rent. He sat his horse at the mouth of the clearing, flanked by 9 deputies who looked less like lawmen and more like the dregs of the Iron Horse Saloon given tin stars and shotguns. "Put 'em up," Bullock said again. He gestured with his revolver. "All of you. Even the kid." Eldridge Sample didn't raise his hands. He kept his Colt at his side, the barrel pointed at the dirt. "You're making a mistake, Bullock," Eldridge said. "We just did your job for you. Carver is buried. The boy is safe." "Carver was a loose end," Bullock said. He swung down from his horse. His deputies followed, forming a semicircle around the exhausted posse. "You think I cared about him? He was just a middleman. I care about the payout." Bullock walked forward. He stopped 10 feet from Eldridge. He looked at the sealed cave. He looked at the dead bandits scattered around the clearing. "Messy," Bullock said. but effective. Saves me the trouble of paying them. You set it up, Eldridge said. The robbery. The kidnapping. I facilitated, Bullock corrected. Mr. Harrington has deep pockets. I figured he wouldn't miss a few thousand to get his heir back. But you had to go and play hero. Bullock looked at Mr. Brooks. The money, Bullock said. Where is it? Brooks clutched his saddlebags. It's secure. You can't have it. I'm the sheriff, Bullock said. I can confiscate evidence. Hand it over. No, Victoria said. She stepped in front of Brooks. She didn't have a gun anymore, but she had the look. You're a thief. I'm a survivor, lady. Now step aside. Bullock raised his gun. He aimed it at Eldridge. Drop the iron, Sample. You're under arrest for the murder of my deputies. The cowboy and the clerk. Found him dead on the trail. They ambushed us, Eldridge said. That's your story. My story is you killed 2 officers of the law, and then slaughtered these poor boys here to cover your tracks. A tragic misunderstanding. Bullock grinned. And these city folks? Well, they got caught in the crossfire. Shame about that. The deputies chuckled. They raised their shotguns. Eldridge looked at the line of men. 10 guns. He had 3 rounds left in the Colt. He looked at Bullock. The sheriff was confident. He thought he held all the cards. You really think you can kill us all and ride back to town? Eldridge asked. People saw us leave. They saw you leave. Town knows better than to ask questions, Bullock said. Besides, Apaches are active this time of year. Terrible thing, an Indian raid. Bullock cocked the hammer. Last chance, Sample. Drop it. Eldridge let the Colt fall. It hit the dust with a thud. Good, Bullock said. Now turn around. On your knees. Eldridge turned slowly. He looked at Victoria. He looked at Brooks. They were terrified. They were waiting for him to do something. He winked. It was a small gesture. Quick. He looked at the pile of rubble blocking the cave. Carver. Eldridge shouted. He's stealing your cut. Bullock laughed. Carver's dead, you fool. You buried him. Not deep enough, a voice roared from the rocks. The rubble pile exploded outward. Not from dynamite, but from rage. Carver hadn't been crushed. He had been shielded by the overhang. He had spent the last 10 minutes digging, listening, and getting mad. He burst out of the hole like a badger. He was covered in dust, bleeding from a scalp wound, and holding a Winchester. He didn't look at Eldridge. He looked at Bullock. You double-crossing son of a bitch. Carver screamed. He fired. The bullet hit Bullock in the shoulder. It spun him around, knocking him off his feet. Bullock screamed, dropping his gun. The deputies panicked. They turned toward the cave. It's a trap, one yelled. They're still alive. Carver's men, the ones who had fled into the hills, reappeared on the rimrock. They had circled back. They saw their boss fighting. They saw the sheriff, who had promised them safety, now shooting at them. They opened fire. A rain of lead fell on the deputies. It was chaos. The sheriff's men were caught in a crossfire between Carver and his own gang. Eldridge moved. He dove for his Colt. He rolled, coming up in a crouch. He grabbed Victoria. He grabbed Percy. Run, Eldridge yelled. To the horses. He shoved them toward the string of mounts. Bullock was on the ground, trying to crawl to his horse. He was bleeding, shouting orders that nobody was listening to. Carver jumped down from the rocks. He walked toward Bullock, ignoring the gunfire around him. He worked the lever of his rifle. You sold me out. Carver yelled. No. Bullock pleaded. It was Sample. He tricked us. Carver didn't listen. He aimed the rifle at Bullock's head. Eldridge didn't watch the execution. He was busy getting the civilians mounted. Get up, he yelled at Brooks, shoving him onto a horse. He vaulted onto the bay. Ride, Eldridge shouted. Ride for the entrance. They galloped out of the clearing. Behind them, the sound of the gunshot that ended Sheriff Bullock's career echoed off the canyon walls, followed by the roar of a bandit gang taking its revenge on the law that had betrayed them. Eldridge led the posse down the canyon trail. He didn't stop until they hit the main road. He looked back. The shooting had stopped. Is the sheriff dead? Percy asked, his voice trembling. He resigned, Eldridge said. He holstered his gun. Let's go to the depot, Eldridge said. I think you folks have a train to catch. Chapter 25. The train station in Iron Point was exactly where it had been 3 days ago, but it looked different to people who had spent the interval getting shot at in a box canyon. Eldridge Sample swung down from the bay. The horse blew out a long breath, its sides heaving, sweat drying in salty streaks on its neck. It had run hard to get away from the gunfire, and now it stood hip-shot, waiting for the cinch to loosen. End of the line, Eldridge said. Mr. Brooks slid off his horse. He almost fell, catching himself on the hitching rail. He looked like a scarecrow that had been dragged through a briar patch. His tweed suit was shredded, his face caked with dust and gunsmoke. We made it, Brooks whispered. He patted the saddlebag where the ransom money still sat, unspent. Victoria Harrington dismounted. She moved stiffly, but she didn't stumble. She walked to the edge of the platform and looked back toward the hills. She still had the .38 tucked in her belt. She looked like she had forgotten it was there, or maybe she just liked the weight. Percy sat on his horse. He was holding his arm, which wasn't broken but bruised enough to complain about. Is there a porter? Percy asked. His voice was raspy, but the entitlement had survived the kidnapping intact. My luggage. I left it on the train. Your luggage is in Kansas City by now, son, Eldridge said. Get down. Percy climbed down. He looked at his boots. They were scuffed. He frowned. This was excessive, Percy said. I shall write a letter to the governor. The lawlessness here is unacceptable. The law is dead in a canyon, Eldridge said. You might want to mention that. Eldridge tied the bay. He walked up the steps to the platform. The station master was there, peering out of his window, looking nervous. He had heard the shooting earlier, seen the posse ride out, and now he saw the remnants limp back. Train coming? Eldridge asked. Eastbound due in 20 minutes, the station master said. Heading for St. Louis. Perfect. Eldridge turned to the group. They were huddled together, a cluster of exhausted wealth in a town made of mud. Buy your tickets, Eldridge said. Get on that train. Don't get off until you see cobblestones. We can't just leave, Brooks said. He clutched the money bag. We owe you. The retainer? The $5,000. He started to open the bag. Keep it, Eldridge said. But we hired you. You hired me to negotiate, Eldridge said. I didn't negotiate. I started a war. That comes pro bono. You saved his life, Victoria said. She stepped forward. She looked at Eldridge. Her face was dirty, her hair a mess, but her eyes were clear. She wasn't the tourist who had bought chaps in the general store anymore. She was someone who knew what a bullet sounded like when it hit meat. I pulled him out of a hole, Eldridge said. He saved himself by not getting shot. I shot a man, Victoria said quietly. He'll live, Eldridge lied. Or he won't. Either way, he was trying to kill you. It felt. She stopped. She looked at her hands. It felt necessary. That's the only time you do it, Eldridge said. When it's necessary. Now, give me the gun. She hesitated. Her hand went to the grip. For a second, she looked like she wanted to keep it. A souvenir of the person she had become in the rocks. Then she pulled it out. She handed it to him, butt first. Thank you, she said. Eldridge took the .38. He tucked it into his coat pocket. Go home, Mrs. Harrington, Eldridge said. Tell your friends the West is just dust and flies. Tell them it's boring. I'll tell them the truth, she said. Don't, Eldridge said. They won't believe you anyway. The train whistle blew in the distance. A long, lonely sound that cut through the twilight. Percy straightened his torn jacket. I intend to sue, he announced. For distress. And for my hat. I lost my hat. You kept your head, Eldridge said. That's a good trade, in Iron Point. The train rolled in. It hissed and clanked, a monster of iron and steam. The brakes squealed. All aboard, the conductor yelled, stepping down. He looked at the group. He saw the dust, the blood, the guns. He didn't ask for tickets. He just stepped aside. Brooks herded Mrs. Sterling onto the car. She was weeping softly, clutching her smelling salts. Percy followed, limping for effect. Victoria stopped on the step. She looked back at Eldridge. What about you? She asked. Where do you go? Eldridge looked at the town. The Iron Horse Saloon was quiet. The jail was empty, the door standing open, a tomb for a sheriff who had bet on the wrong horse. I go get a drink, Eldridge said. And then I find a card game. Be careful, she said. Careful is for people with something to lose, Eldridge said. She smiled. A small, sad smile. Then she turned and went into the car. The train jerked. Steam vented. The wheels began to turn. Eldridge watched it go. He watched the red taillights fade into the darkness of the east. He was alone on the platform. He felt the weight of the $40 in his pocket, the winnings from the first game. He felt the weight of the .38. He walked down the steps. He walked to the bay horse. He untied it. You hungry? He asked the horse. The horse nudged him. Me too. He led the horse down the street. He passed the jail. He didn't look inside. He knew what wasn't there. There was no law in Iron Point tonight. Just a vacuum waiting to be filled by the next man with a tin star and a greedy heart. He passed the saloon. He could hear the piano starting up again. A different player, maybe. Or maybe the same one, playing the same song, because the song never really changed. He stopped at the general store. It was closed, dark. He kept walking. He reached the edge of town. The tracks ended here, the steel rails vanishing into the scrub. Eldridge mounted up. He turned the horse west. Toward the open country. Toward the places where the trains didn't run, and the telegraph wires didn't reach. Let's drift, Eldridge said. He kicked the horse into a trot. Listen to over 100 audiobooks free on Western Wednesdays. I reserved a copy of Wrangler just for you. The end.